I'm Giannis Angelou, and this is The Business Room, a place where we're talking about business, careers, and entrepreneurship. My next podcast guest is Mr. Glen Allison, a travel photographer and a visual artist. Glen has lived a life that most of us can only dream about. He's a true citizen of the world, he's a visual storyteller and a creative nomad. For 30 years, he's been roaming the world at will with a camera and a backpack, creating very powerful images. His initial training was as an architect in UC Berkeley, California, which led him to a career of 20 years as an architectural photographer in that area of the States, plus taking international assignments that led him to travel in different parts of the world. Then he had a second career as a travel stock photographer, working with the best agency on the planet, which is Getty Images. And then he had a third career, a third phase that is still going on. It is probably most creative than the previous two. Creating art, fine art, images ranging for urban abstractions, to holy men in India, to painted bodies in his studio in Bangkok, to whimsical images created by AI and traditional digital photography techniques. His work has been honored by ASMP and PX3 Paris, and as if that was not enough, he has written 3 books, the latest of which is called Hidden Powers and is now available on Amazon. The theme of his book is personal transformation, the way and the ability to overcome our problems and what life throws at us, the ability to get up every time we fall down, coupled with many instances, many events from his travels and his life, things he learned from personal experiences as he traveled all over the world and met people of all nationalities and states of life. Glen is a personal friend. I met him on the 2nd of August 1994 in Santorini. And as you understand, this long career, a long career of that magnitude, has not been without its ups and downs and peaks and valleys and moments of triumphs and moments of despair. About all this and many more topics, we talk with Glen in what resulted to be a quite long podcast. We also explore the meaning of life, the meaning of creativity, the appreciation of time, what it means to be able to enjoy the moments, smell the roses while we're still creative and productive, the importance of health, the importance of expressing ourselves, the importance of following our dreams and being able to pursue what makes us happy, the difference between relative and absolute happiness, and the meaning of life in general. It's been a very enjoyable talk, a long talk, but I'm sure that you will find great value in it and enjoy it as much as we did. This podcast was filmed in our studio, located at the Hellenic Design Center facilities on 63 Chalkidiki Street in Thessaloniki, Greece. Hellenic Design Center, HDC, advocates and teaches the design thinking methodology, an excellent approach for problem solving in business and organizations. For more information about custom problem solving approaches and seminars, please contact HDC at the email below.
Every day you might wake up in a different city, in a different hotel. From the pit of bankruptcy, I had no money whatsoever. When the crash happened, I didn't use any wise business sense. If I complained, and I would just dig my hole deeper. I'd been a Buddhist for 20 years. From that, a weak life condition, I wouldn't be motivated to fight as hard. I'm absolutely confident that I could dig my grave. I was asking myself, what was my life all about? Why was I doing this? But that was my ultimate mission in life.
So here we are. Glen, you're more than a photographer. You are a seeker. You're always open to change. You're a builder of meaning and a lifelong explorer of both the outer world and the inner journey, committed to creating maximum life value for everyone you meet, including me. And I'm proud to call you a friend. So Glen Allison, welcome to Business Room Greece.
Great. It's so good to be back in Greece again. And of course, to see you, my world's best friend. But, in the last 32 years, we've known each other. This is our 8th time to meet up in person.
Is it?
And, maybe 5 or 10 emails a day for the last 25 or 30 years.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey, full of communication and, yeah. So we have met in Santorini in 1993 during a photo shoot. And then we met again in the States, in Los Angeles.
No, I think we met again in Greece a few years after that.
Oh, yeah. Chronologically speaking, yes, that was the course of things, yes. But I mean, talking about other countries, we've met you invited me in your place in Los Angeles in 2002, and then we met in France, in Indonesia, and Cyprus. It's been a beautiful journey. So yeah. Well, talking about journeys and trips, you've traveled how many countries?
I kind of lost count, but about 110 or so.
110. Okay. This is more than enough to send some people spinning. and your profession, your job, your vocation is a travel photographer?
Well, technically, I started out as my travels started out, I was a travel photographer, but I really think of myself as like a visual artist because these days I'm not shooting much travel,
Mm-hmm. Okay, but you had a life that most people dream about, and especially if they're working in a company or in a cubicle or they have their own business and their leisure time, let alone vacation time, let alone travel time, is limited. And this is bewildering to people. I mean, it has to do also with the way that one earns his or her income. I mean, I remember when we were touring Greece in the summer of 2000, and we were in Crete. And then you were logging into your bank accounts in the US to see your income from Getty and other picture agencies, and you were earning tens of thousands of dollars per month. While at the same time, there were friends of yours that were working in the States that will send you emails asking you when you're going to find a proper job. So what does this say about people? What's up with that? I mean, what?
Well, the way our life unfolds, we structure our everyday life today based on all the causes we made. We met people and fell in love with them and got married and had families and pursued careers. And there's a certain freedom in that, but there's also a certain kind of everyday monotony that can, doing that 2-hour commute every day to the office for 10 years, it's like this can kind of become a bit monotonous. So I think a lot of people, it's human nature to seek an escape from that, so we really magnify the value of that 2-week vacation per year. We spend all year planning for it and dreaming about it and saving up for it and everything. But the routine that we establish in our life seems kind of normal for everybody. So somebody like me comes along and doesn't have an 8 to 5 and every day might wake up in a different city, in a different hotel and meeting all kinds of people and experiencing cultures and stuff. It sounds kind of amazing, kind of incredible that somebody could live like that, So you mentioned earning a lot of money. Well, not at first. I mean, I started my travel career right from the pit of bankruptcy. I had no money whatsoever, and it took a while to build up that income stream. So it wasn't like I started out with a lot of money and I've always lived this great life. This great life, so to speak, was birthed from all the difficulty
and evolved,
and an evolution that transpired, right? And so early on, I realized that, this bankruptcy, which actually was caused by a downturn you mentioned I was an architectural photographer for 20 years.
When was that?
That was in the 70s and 80s. I have a degree in architecture. So instead of practicing architecture, I photography had been a hobby. So for some reason I was drawn to photography, and I thought, okay, I'll just become an architectural photographer because I understood structures and design and that sort of thing. And so I became a photographer. But over the first 2 decades, I built up a very, not without its struggles, of course, but ultimately built up a little mini empire. I had an amazing studio and 5 full-time employees. And, in the last couple of years before the bankruptcy, I made $1 million. And so I had could spend money any way I wanted, kind of, well, within limits. And then this bankruptcy was triggered by a crash in the California real estate segment. And all of a sudden, my huge jobs were just dried up overnight. And, I was always an artiste. I was never a business person, so there were no YouTube videos about entrepreneurship and stuff like that. So I really wasn't focused on, investing money and saving money. Not that I didn't save and put some money in some simple blue chip stocks and stuff like that. But when the crash happened, I didn't use any wise business sense. I didn't lay everybody off. I kept them on staff at full salary. And before I knew it, my significant, $250,000 savings just was depleting month by month by month. Eventually, I couldn't pay the mortgage on the house and everything. So, I had to declare bankruptcy. So it was from that point of having lost everything. My house, my amazing furniture. I had curated this modern museum of art furniture, and I had this amazing kind of lifestyle going on, a hillside house overlooking Los Angeles and everything. And so all of a sudden that was gone. I was left with my van, actually living in my van, and literally got to a point where I had no money. And which was kind of shocking to me, but, we'll probably talk about this a bit later, but I'd been a Buddhist for 20 years. And so I had learned a lot of things, like we can transform suffering into benefit. And so I had this 20-year foundation of focused on not being consumed by, the difficulty. And it wasn't just an intellectual understanding. It was, the practice I was doing enabled me to entrench this in my core. So when the bankruptcy came, of course I didn't like it. I'd lost everything and all the money I could, I used to treat my staff to lobster lunches and stuff. I couldn't do that anymore. But I knew that if I complained, and I would just dig my hole deeper, right? Because somehow I had made, even though the bankruptcy was triggered by something seemingly outside of my control, an economic decline in the industry, I hadn't prepared myself. I hadn't stashed money. I'd spent it too frivolously. I'd kind of developed an invulnerability that's easy to do when the money's just gushing in, And so I realized that the fact that I actually had to go into bankruptcy wasn't caused by the downturn in the economy. It was caused by the lack of preparation in my life. I hadn't bought gold and all the kinds of things that would give me security. So I took full responsibility. I'd learned that from all the Buddhist insights I'd gained, and that complaining about my situation in life was only going to make it worse because, we make causes. Complaining is kind of a negative cause. I'd just dig that pit deeper. So at any rate, I, had a pretty healthy kind of attitude about all that. And, I decided if I got to deliver pizzas.
Yeah, but there were practical problems, like daily survival and heat and food and clothing and everything. So how did you overcome that? I'm guessing that this kind of volatility in one's life and one's income would send people begging for work or drag them to the doctor's office for antidepressants. So many people would have very different reactions to this kind of turmoil.
Well, first of all, I wasn't depressed. I knew exactly why I wound up where I was. And though I didn't know exactly what the kind of cause I needed to do to dig my way out, I was absolutely confident that I could dig my way out and that I wasn't going to make my situation worse by just bemoaning my fate in life, right? So, as I mentioned, I got a pizza delivery job. So I had a little bit of income coming in and I could eat free pizzas, after work and stuff like that. And I was living in my van. And The other thing, the way bankruptcies worked in California is you filed bankruptcy, but it took 9 months for it to go into effect.
9 months?
9 months.
Okay.
So there's like a limbo period there. You can't discard your possessions because they're part of the bankruptcy program, but they actually don't take them away from you.
You mean you can sell them?
No, you cannot. You can't sell them. I mean, they're part. You've already filed for bankruptcy, so they're part of the assets of the bankruptcy.
Can you use them?
Well, you could still live in it for this 9 months.
Can you rent them?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, if I could, I had this amazing house, and of course, money is the value of money is very different today than it was 30 years ago.
That's all right.
But I figured if I could bring in a couple of $1,000 a month, I could kind of keep my life going. But I couldn't find a renter. It's like a lot of people were affected by this thing. So it actually took some time. I had to go through this pizza delivery. Actually, it wasn't very long, but it was about 3 months or so before I found a renter, and for my place. And but I think in retrospect, had I found a renter immediately, I wouldn't have really absorbed the lessons so deeply. So by living in that van and having a lot of time to ponder at night as the rain hit the metal roof of the van, and really ponder my life deeply and how I got there, and to build my determination of how I was going to get out, and how I was going to. I realized I had to practice what I preach, about all these Buddhist insights I felt so great about. I had to really prove that I could live them now. So had I rented my place out quickly, I wouldn't have dug deep enough to really get to the core.
Okay, I hear you, but this cinematic image with the sound effects of rain and everything, and you're living in your van, sounds like putting some salt in the wound in order to get your pain intensify and then make the best out of it. Push your mind to be able to overcome the adversity and realize, take a responsibility, become aware, and then overcome it. But it sounds painful, though.
Well, it could have been, but you have to realize I wasn't coming from a low life condition. I was coming from no money condition, but I wasn't coming from a low life condition.
What's the difference?
Well, there's two kinds of happiness: relative happiness and absolute happiness.
Okay.
So relative happiness is a function of things relative to you. In my case, I had a lot of money, had the great house, had all this staff, had amazing assignments, and some of them which were taking me around the world. I was getting published all over the world. And so, if my happiness was just based on relative, there's only one constant in life, and that's that everything changes, right? So if my level of happiness was based on those relative things, then, inevitably things change. Our loved ones might leave us or die, or, these kinds of things happen in life. Economic downturns happen and wipe out your income and so on and so forth. So it's natural, that we want comfortable lifestyle. We want the security of having good income and a happy family and all these kinds of things. But in reality, that's kind of a relative. It's our happiness is relative to the success of all those areas, right? So there's a different kind of happiness that isn't a function of the relative things in your life. It's a happiness, this condition of absolute happiness. It's not a state of mind. It's not something you can conjure up in your mind. It's a condition of life that has to be forged from the core. And actually, you can't forge it without some difficulty in your life. The difficulty gives you the opportunity to forge this kind of absolute condition of happiness, so that it's not a function of whether or not you have anything.
Is it a decision or a leap of faith?
It's not a leap of faith. It's a decision to pursue that path of elevating yourself. So this is a conscious decision that we can make, that no matter how difficult it gets. I know it's easy to say that, but it's it's difficult to live it, right?
Okay.
But again, I had this foundation of Buddhist theory and insight and wisdom and a practice that went with it, which helped me well up a stronger life condition when my life condition was, low or sad or whatever. And so when the bankruptcy occurred, I'd been doing this for 20 years. So I'd gotten pretty good at it. This was like the real test. I mean, if this is, it was important for me to prove to myself, and by extension, to show an example to others who are maybe in the middle of struggle too, that it wasn't just a state of mind, that it was a state of life. So not that this is, I'd attained a maximum enlightenment or anything. I mean, this is a process. But at that point in the progression, I had a pretty good, solid foundation of understanding, not in my mind, but in my life, that all these relative things that I lost didn't determine whether or not I was happy. So, when I had all this money and was so busy, and you can imagine all these assignments, I had no time to meditate or think, that sort of thing. So all of a sudden now I'm in this van sleeping. It starts to rain. And for the first time, I could hear the raindrops, like smelling the roses, right? And so it wasn't like this cinematic, thing. It's like I really lay there in my van and, wow, I loved hearing that rain, because I knew my being able to rise from this was not a function of whether or not I was stuck in this pit temporarily, I knew it was just temporary. And so, with all this insights and things that I'd studied about, I realized that there are lessons that I can learn from having my face flat on the ground. I couldn't learn those lessons from a book. I couldn't learn those lessons when my life was full of abundance. It was only when all that relative stuff was completely removed,
Right.
that I was at rock bottom, that I could really, make a determination. Okay, now I'm going to rise from this low point. I'm going to somehow, I don't know how, but I'm determined. I'm going to well up a determination that just is unshakable, that I'm going to move forward from this. And that's going to give me not only personal great fulfillment to see myself rising from that, but it would inspire others who might want to be looking along and seeing. I had lots of friends who were aware of what's going on. Many of my Buddhist friends also, they knew I'd been practicing, that philosophy for 20 years. And so they were eager to see how I handled this. So it wasn't just for me, it was for others as well.
Did you experience any back and forth during that period of time? Or was it a seamless progression from one state of life to the other?
Well, we're human. So our life condition isn't always constant. And so, it's like if you're working out at the gym and you're keeping a regular routine, your muscles stay strong. But if you weaken your gym practice, then your muscles start to disappear.
Right.
So like my foundational spiritual side of my life, if I weakened that, I would see myself falling back into, approaching suffering, So I realized I had to get my gym routine back together faith-wise, So I intensified my Buddhist approach, so that I could keep my life condition high, because a weak life condition, a weak life condition, I wouldn't be motivated to fight as hard, right? So I had to keep my perspectives higher, So, but because I had this 20-year foundation, it pretty much was a straight up thing. There weren't that very many dips down. Or if they were only very shallow,
There are some scenes in your book that is called Hidden Powers, where you're describing events that happened when you were younger. And one of them that repeatedly happened was falling asleep at the wheel while driving. And it might be an event that happened to you when you were young, but it can also be taken as a metaphor for life. Sometimes we fell asleep on the wheel. So what does this say about human nature? I mean, why do we do the things we do? I'm talking about the mistakes, of course. Why don't we save for a rainy day, whatever this means, both literally and metaphorically, when we're in a very good financial situation, for example? Are we unable to believe that change might come for us with a vengeance and, bring us down? Something might turn 180 degrees and bring us in a difficult spot. Is human nature based on repetition, on trust that everything will be the same always?
Well, I think that we all hope that if we once we start developing some stability in our life in whatever realm, we don't want that to diminish.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we want it to keep growing and expanding. But the reality is all kinds of stuff happens in life. We get diseases, we fall and break our leg, economy crashes, all these kinds of things. Unexpected stuff happens, right? So what's the most important is that, in the very core of our life, the really foundational levels of our life, that we have found ways to develop an inner strength that will be so rock solid that any kind of obstacle that arises, either by our own causing or seemingly, just out of the blue, that we can, rise from that. And so it's imperative that, let me back up a second. You don't think about this stuff too much when things are going well.
That's for sure.
You just don't think about it. And so by and large, most of us don't really prepare this kind of life condition because we don't, number one, we probably don't really know how. I mean, some people have personal religions, other people don't or whatever, but, a lot of people try different things to kind of get more self-control and that sort of thing. But a lot of times, a lot of people are just scrambling for, how to develop this, and they maybe haven't developed by the time something hits that's bad, so to speak. Actually, when I say bad, I should put it in quotes, because on the surface, it looks bad. But again, as I mentioned earlier, without your face being flattened to the ground, there's lessons that you can learn there that you can't learn if you never hit the ground, right? And so what's important? To hit the ground a few times and learn how to rise from it, or to never hit the ground, at all, and eventually one day some big thing slams you to the ground, and then you're not prepared, So all these little difficulties in life can actually enable us to start to build this foundation.
Well, as long as they don't kill you. Like Nietzsche said, whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Of course, Nietzsche is dead now. But if you were alive, I would love to have an interview with him in the studio.
Me too.
Get him a cup of coffee and really ask him to elaborate on that, because it sounds a little bit harsh to me, to be honest. And as many people that are talking about business and self-development say, it's all right to fail a few times, but unless one of these failures wipes you out. So we had to be careful, because I hear what Nietzsche says, but a big failure that may wipe you out or cripple you for life might prevent you from ever being able to rise up again. It depends on the severity of the case. So maybe we should take some quotes, famous international quotes, with a grain of salt sometimes.
Not necessarily. There's probably some wisdom in there. Maybe we just haven't honed our perception to see it.
There is, but things are not black and white, are they?
No, but, a thought just triggered. There was an incredible transformation that happened to me during that bankruptcy. And the real focus actually occurred during that 3 months that, I was living in my van and delivering those pizzas. Because, as I said, I really was starting to ponder very, very, very deeply, not only how I got there, but more importantly, how I was going to respond. And so a very crucial thing happened. I want to preface this by saying that I didn't really come from a rich family. I had to work my own way through university and stuff to kind of carve my own path and to get an education and that sort of thing. But probably because, I didn't come from a wealthy background and a background of abundance and that sort of thing. My basic focus on life was pursuing financial success, and of course the trappings of fame and glory. And when you see your photographs published, there's a certain ego boost that happens.
Absolutely.
So for that 20 years, my first 20 years of my Buddhist practice, and my first, which coincided basically with the first 20 years of my career, My underlying drive, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was going for this career growth and the trappings that come with that, the great, positive trappings, money and publicity and this sort of thing. I didn't attain great fame or anything, but a certain significance that would draw lots of clients and stuff like that.
There's nothing wrong about them.
Right. But I'm just saying that my focus was to get that, and it was for personal satisfaction. So it was all, and I have a bit of an ego issue as well. So I've always been a me. That's what destroyed 2 of my marriages, right? Because I was so focused on myself. So after that 20 years of building up a successful career and then losing it all and going to bankruptcy, during that 3 months of concentrated time, really for the first time, I started delving to levels that I had never dug into before. And I really was asking myself, what was my life all about? Why was I doing this? Where was I going with this? There's no end to chasing money. You have a nice house, but then you can have a yacht, or then you can have a private plane. And it's just like, there's no end to that. And I realized that because my level of absolute happiness had been growing all along. And I realized that stuff was not going to bring me this fulfillment. So during this 3 months of deep pondering, I realized that I needed to shift my mission and, to shift it toward a loftier kind of purpose. So, I realized I needed to shift my focus on what my ultimate mission in life was. Surely it could be greater than just me all the time, and how much growth I could have. And my Buddhist practice had opened me up to the sanctity of not only my life, but other people's lives and respecting other cultures. So I was beginning to think about others more than myself, because everything I was reading, in context with this growth, focused me toward that. But I realized that really fundamentally at the core, deep inside, I really needed to have a clear focus on why I was living.
Are we talking about contribution, legacy, or both?
Well, I think they're both intertwined, because if you make, say, great contributions in your life to society or humanity, that also builds your legacy. So there's no separation; there's a fusion between the two. Right. But I realized that if I just, decided to rebuild my life from the bankruptcy and, just go out and attain all this wealth again and, all the trappings that go with it, I was kind of like doing the same thing, just doing it for myself,
Which, again, there's nothing wrong about it, because it can be a mean to higher purpose.
Right. And actually, from a position of personal abundance, you really have a lot more freedom to help other people and inspire people. So, no, there's nothing wrong. I'm not trying to say that pursuit of personal gain and development is bad, but that was my ultimate mission in life, right? Just alone. And by then I had, I didn't have wives. I'd gone through two marriages, so I didn't have a partner that I had to compensate for. It was only just me, just satisfying my own dreams and desires.
No pets.
No goldfish, and all. Because I somewhere deep down, I knew I wanted to travel. I didn't want any encumbrances like that. The things that depended on me. Right. That's probably why my marriages didn't work out, because I didn't want anybody depending on me. And pets really depend on you, especially dogs. And so no pets. Goldfish probably don't care, but dogs do. So, during that 3 months, it sounds like a short period of time, but you realize I had a 20-year foundation of beginning to study and think about all this stuff. So I realized that, I didn't really have time to waste. So, I didn't want this dragging on for years and years. So I just kind of instantly, the clear focus came, I don't know which raindrop it came between, but at some point there, it was really clear that instead of, here I was at rock bottom. I'd been an architectural photographer. I had this dream of being a travel photographer, had no experience, no portfolio, no money to go out and pursue it. So it seemed like almost impossible, but I realized if I was going to go on what really would truly be, in my mind, a vision of a grand journey in life, it had to be more than just for me. So I realized that somehow, even in the midst of suffering, my own difficulty and the struggle and, cold nights in the van and all that stuff, that I had to even use the difficulty to inspire others, to show them that I wasn't going to be stopped by it. And as I encounter people, I could lift them up, and I didn't know really how to do that. But what I wanted to do is to use my life, either whether it was coming from a point of loss or a point of gain, that the reason I'm here is to inspire people, to give people hope, and to leave them with feeling better than when I left. I mean, that's an ideal goal because we're human and we're not always, our life condition isn't that high. But there was this fundamental shift that happened. And it was, once the scale tipped in the inner core of my life, and of course my mind followed that. It wasn't just a mental shift. It was something that manifested from inside me, right? And then my mind caught up to that really, really fast. Once I realized why I'm doing it, then there was no difficulty in the suffering anymore because it was part of the process. Even from the suffering, I could show people how to battle things, right? And boy, that changed everything because suffering wasn't suffering anymore. It was actually an avenue, a vehicle, an opportunity, right? And so this was going along perfectly with all my Buddhist philosophy and stuff that I'd learned.
So was that revelation, was that a progression? I mean, you had been cultivating your strength, your mental strength and your perception for years with Buddhism. And when this shift came to reality, was it made in a few days, in a few months, in a few weeks?
It was actually...
Until it became conscious and...
No, it was always kind of conscious, but the trigger, to the flip, actually would never have occurred had I not experienced bankruptcy. Because I wouldn't have been in a situation where I would have ever dug that deep to realize that my mission was, in my perspective, too self-centered. All along it had been too self-centered.
So it was in the back of your mind somehow?
Well, I kind of knew the theory because I'd been reading all these articles and studying and hearing experiences in the Buddhist gatherings and stuff. So I kind of, all the Buddhist teachings talked about these kinds of concepts, but it was all just theory, right? So when the bankruptcy happened and it really threw me to the ground, it's like that was the trigger. That's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I mean, I wouldn't have said that. My proclivity would have been not to say that then because who wanted to lose everything? But looking back in retrospect, had that not happened, I wouldn't have had the trigger. I wouldn't have had, I wouldn't have been at the bottom where I really realized I had to make a change. I just had to. It was no longer theory anymore. It was really welling up from an inner awakening that I had to shift why I was on this earth. Most people really, I'm guessing most people don't really know why they're on this earth. I certainly didn't really know ultimately. And so I knew this was, I had to discover what that meant because I didn't have all the pieces, but I didn't know how the puzzle was going to fit together. I just knew I was at rock bottom and I had to from there rebuild a new me, a new purpose, right? And so, interestingly, once I made that inner transformation, it was really a transformation. It had been building, but it happened almost instantly, once it was very clear focus. I mean, in that 3 months, somewhere right in the middle of that, this flip happened, because I'd had enough time to ponder and hear all these raindrops and stuff. And so the minute, literally almost the instant that flip happened, I had, by the way, because I had done many international architectural assignments, some of that involved a little bit of travel. And several years earlier, stock photography agencies were kind of just in their birth then. But there was a lady who had written articles and stuff, and she formed her own little small, out of her closet kind of stock photo industry. And she didn't have very many photographers on board, but she knew I was successful, and we'd met at various professional gatherings and stuff. So she invited me to join her agency. And I never really did because I was so busy with all my stuff. So, once the bankruptcy happened, then I thought, oh, okay, I'll put together what few travel images I have and I'll give them to her, And so I was accepted into her agency just right after I made that flip. And just a few months later, Getty Images bought her. Well, there was another intermediary agency that Getty bought first, but that other agency bought her. And very shortly after that, Getty came into existence and bought that other agency. It was one of the world's best agencies out of the UK. So all of that happened just the instant I made a shift in what my mission ought to be in my life. For me, my discovery of where I wanted to point my life. And then it's like the universe said, he doesn't need to deliver pizzas anymore. He's got it. He knows what he's got to do. Had I not, had I been wallowing and suffering in all of this, if I'd allowed myself to suffer in misery, it's like the universe probably would have said, personifying the universe, would have said, okay, we got to keep him delivering pizzas for maybe a year or two until he learns his lesson, right?
I'm giving you the lesson, but you're not taking the...
Right.
Yeah.
So, but the instant, it manifested, I knew exactly I didn't know how to do it, but I knew where I had to head. It's like the universe has said, okay, let's not waste any more time. No more pizzas, And at that instant, I got a renter for my place. A rock group from the UK was in LA to do a recording. They needed a temporary 9-month, well, it took me 3 months to sell it. So they needed for the duration of the bankruptcy 9-month period, holding period, I had 6 months of time. They needed 6 months to do their recording. I rented out my place. This immediately gave me a couple of $1,000s every month. So I quit my pizza delivery job instantly, bought all the film. This is back in the film before digital.
Right.
Bought film and headed out to, I had my van for 6 more months. I figured, my brain was going 90 miles an hour. I could, sleep in my van, but I could shoot, Mount Rushmore and the St. Louis Arch and the Statue of Liberty and all of these icons that my photo agency needed these travel photos. And as an architectural photographer, I know how to shoot an Eiffel Tower and stuff because I know lighting and composition and stuff. So I knew I had to rush out there for that next 6 months and just shoot everything in the United States that would be possible, an icon kind of image that would lay a foundation for me to start making some money. Because at the end of that 6 more months, and the 9-month bankruptcy period, I'd lose the van, I'd lose the house, and I'd have no more income,
Right.
So I had to like really hustle. So, but anyway, all of that transpired almost instantly when I finally, clarified in my life why I'm on this earth.
Let's take a quick moment to thank our friends at Hellenic Design Center, where this podcast was filmed, the people who bring the design thinking methodology to life. Design thinking is a creative and practical way to tackle challenges and spark fresh ideas in any business or organization. If you're looking for tailored solutions or inspiring workshops that energize your team, HDC can help you get there. Just drop them a line using the email you see on your screen. So is this what's happening in life? We keep on getting lessons from life, but if we don't learn them, if we don't take the message, if we don't get the message, we don't graduate to the next level or something?
Well, I think theoretically anybody can
do that.
Anybody can do that. And, I haven't read as many self-development books as you have, but the ones that I've read pretty much throw out those kinds of platitudes. And everybody can agree with them all, but they don't know how to do it. They don't really know how to make this transformation. And
well, maybe they have a clue or a few more clues, but they see the top of the mountain when they're at the bottom of the mountain, and they say that, what? The distance from where I'm standing to where I'm going to go is too hard for me, too much, because I'm too young, too old, too fat, too whatever, too broke, and they don't take the first step, because the whole thing has to do with also taking incremental steps that may sound a little bit silly or funny or inadequate in the beginning, but then they build on one another, and you get to close the gap and walk the distance.
Yeah, again, that makes perfect sense. Anybody could read that in a book and say, I agree with that. The reality is, of course, we have to take a first step. That's a little journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step.
Well, that's true.
So, but many times, from that low position, we take a first step and we just knock right back down to the ground again. So we realize we got to work on perseverance and fortitude and a lot of stuff. So how do you build that fortitude and perseverance? Well, if that's what, like in my case, I needed, and probably what most people would need, actually a second, after you take the first few steps to get knocked right back down again, if you're determined that you're going to build this fortitude, that very stumble on this step at a time kind of process is actually how you build fortitude. Because if you can get up again, they always say it's not important how many times you fall down. It's only important how many times you get up. Right. But because I knew my mission, I wasn't swayed by the intermediary stumbles. There were many. There were so many. There, after that 6 months period, I somehow finagled and I sold a big, huge lens and finagled enough money to. I lost my house and I was living in Los Angeles. You can't exist without a car there. But I knew I'd been to Europe a few times, and I knew I could stay. I could sleep on overnight trains, and there was ways of doing it. And I put together just enough money from selling the last bit of equipment that I somehow kept out of the bankruptcy, and I figured it would last me a few months. And so, off to Europe I went.
So you transcended the notion of this is good or this is bad, and you went to I'll do what's necessary for me to make progress.
Right, and because I had this grand mission of learning how, and this was a learning curve. For the first time in my life, I was trying to shift my mission for doing it for others instead of just doing it for myself. And so, but along with that understanding, I realized that all these intermediary stumbles would also be the fuel that I could transform to build this kind of fortitude. So I was going to say, when I went to Europe, that money did run out. And I panhandled on the streets of Paris, and I slept on not park benches, but benches in the railway stations and stuff like that. So I had lots of periods, after I had engaged and found myself on the other side of the world, all these obstacles were still hitting. But my mission was so great, and I realized it, so I could live through that. And it wasn't suffering, it was stepping stones.
Well, in your book, you're talking about the ego, like being a prison, which you have to escape from in order to be able to elevate yourself and go into this flow of energy and purpose.
Well, it's impossible to escape your ego. Some of us, it manifests more at the surface than others, like in my case. But, from the moment we're born, our ego starts to develop. We start to, our stimuli in the environment, making us aware of ourselves and everything. So it's not a matter of detaching ourselves from our ego. Ultimately, it's a matter of using whatever amounts of ego we've got to create more value with it. So it's not like we have to change who we are. We just have to start to shift step by step how we use our positivities and our negativities, our flaws, if we want to call them that, how we use that to create value until we can transform them into assets, and not flaws anymore.
Are we optimizing ourselves? Are we deploying ourselves in a better way?
Well, I think in my case, I can't speak for everyone, but I was really recognizing the real me that had kind of like enabled me to kind of wind up in this kind of situation. And so I realized I needed to optimize my pursuit of value. And it wasn't a complicated shift, because if you're trying to, if you walk into a dark room full of people who can't see where they're going, and you flip the switch, it not only gives them light, it gives you light too, right? So you don't, for me to shift towards doing it for a loftier reason, to somehow, in whatever capacity, to start functioning as someone that lifted people up and gave hope, I didn't lose anything from that. I could develop more compassion. I could develop empathy. I could grow myself actually quicker by realizing that if I'm doing it for other people, as kind of like the grand pursuit, I'd get all those things too. So if I'm just doing it for my own personal gain, it's harder to develop empathy and compassion and magnanimity and all of these kinds of things.
I hear you. Then, this U-turn is amazing, but if you go back in time, you're talking in your book about the violence that you had experienced from your father towards your mom. So when someone starts his life having such kinds of experiences, I think it's understandable that in the beginning he or she takes care of number one, which is the self. And then time matures your spirit and your heart and your soul, and you understand that something is missing, and then you're trying to find what's missing, and then if a catalyst appears at the same time or at that period of time, like the bankruptcy, then you can, if you have cultivated your awareness, then you can make the U-turn. How did these events in your younger life affect you? Do you think it makes sense?
Well, in theory, that all sounds good. I'm sure you can find this similar kind of theory in a zillion self-development books because it's right on theory, you know. But the reality is that we don't always have this lofty perspective and this lofty insight at the surface ready to tap into. All we have is we're suffering, you know. Now, I want to say that I didn't have massive family discord, but there was a fair measure of family discord in my life. And basically it was mental and physical abuse toward my mother, not toward me and my sister. But, it was quite traumatic. And it wasn't maybe as traumatic as a lot of people have experienced, but in terms of my own life, it was traumatic. You know, one night when I was 9 years old, to save my mother from yet another beating, I grabbed a kitchen knife to protect her. Well, I was just a little scrawny kid, and I had no strength, and my father was this huge guy, and he just wrenched it out of my hand and threw the knife on the floor and pushed me aside and just kept on, Mm-hmm. So you can imagine the kind of trauma, I was too young to really think deeply, why is this happening to me? And I just knew I was miserable, and I was helpless, and there wasn't anything I could do, and I just wanted to escape that kind of life. And so that point of weakness, I had no really intellectual development at that point. I hadn't read any books about all this stuff or anything, and I was just left with wanting to. Well, I immediately blamed my father. Because it's typical that, we in some cultures blame others more than others, more Buddhist countries kind of take more personal responsibility for their karma, and they accept it and move on. Other people like blame, and you create wars out of this blame, right? But it's pretty natural to find the cause of what you can identify as the cause of your suffering and ascribe blame to that person. So you can imagine that I had a much closer, deeper, warmer bond with my mother than I ever did with my father.
I hear you, and I feel you completely, 100%.
Yeah. So, and this went on for years and years and years. So you mentioned earlier this fall asleep at the wheel.
Right.
I didn't, of course, I didn't even realize I needed psychological help at that age. But one aspect of that trauma, even though it wasn't totally severe. I mean, I didn't get beat myself or anything. But one aspect of that is that I really wanted to escape. I wanted to escape this suffering, and I didn't know how. And I think subliminally, this manifested in terms of this fall asleep at the wheel propensity that I developed. And it was bizarre because there was kind of, and I was conscious of this at the time, there was kind of like a thrill to see if I could fall asleep and wake up alive. Yet it was very scary because I ultimately didn't want to die. I think I kind of somehow couldn't identify it, but I knew I had a greater mission in life than to die, so I didn't really want to die. But I was really tempting fate, and I went to sleep and drove off the road so many times. In the book, I go into detail about this, but I wiped out 2 cars, and it's a wonder I even walked out alive.
Well, cats have how many lives?
9.
7 or 9.
9.
So
9.
You should be careful.
I was getting up to 9, man. It's like it wasn't much opportunity left. So it was, by the time I had my last crash, I was about 27 years old. So this had gone on. I think I started driving when I was 16. And my first experience of falling asleep at the wheel was at 18. And my parents had moved to California, and I was going to school in Texas, where we were from. And I'd done 1 year at the university there. So I, shifted out to the University of California at Berkeley. And so, decided to move to California. So my father came to pick me up, my possessions and stuff, and he and I were going to drive back to California. And he was a marathoner. I think that's where I get my marathoning from. It's like this guy wouldn't take 3 days. He would just drive straight through, like 30 hours straight through. So, and because I'd been driving a couple of years, we shared driving. And as we were driving along, my father was kind of half asleep, I guess, or maybe fully asleep. I'm driving along, and subliminally, this death wish started manifesting. And I had this bizarre thing, like if I just fell asleep and crashed the car and we both died, it would mend my misery and destroy my father, and everything would be great, And so I let myself fall asleep. It was almost like I didn't have any control over it. But, my head hit the window. I instantly woke up. But we did change lanes, and it freaked my father out completely. And,
of course.
And
I can only guess.
Yeah, he was screaming. He had a kind of a violent kind of nature, and cursing and all kinds of stuff, So he, immediately said, you get out of the driver's seat. And he relegated me to the passenger seat for the rest of the trip, So anyway, it was an unbelievable experience.
So I think that many times when someone either wants to end his life or her life, or create such a big impact, it's not like he or she's actually looking for a bad impact. She or he just wants the pain to stop. And if the level of maturity at that time and age and circumstances is not enough, or is not conscious enough to help this person make the switch and decide to create, as in the Buddhist saying, is take poison and turn it into medicine, then the preconceived perception of what is happening is that I want everything to finish, to end. I want my pain to end, so there's nothing I can do. So, boom. And this is why so many times, so many people end their marriages or their relationships or their friendships or their health perseverance or their economical growth, and they trip themselves and they self-sabotage themselves because things are not going their way, and they may have reached the point of, the pain may have reached the point of critical mass, and if they cannot overcome them, they just want something to stop, anything that bothers them to stop. And this can be done either in a violent way, like a catastrophe of some sort, or with addiction and instant gratification and dopamine and junk food and any kind of consumption that gives pleasure now, here and now, but is kind of taking energy and from your future life, like spending your future life now in ways that just consume you, giving you instant pleasure in order to be able to overcome this wave of grief, this wave of pain. So it takes a leap of faith, perhaps, and a decision, as we discussed before, to be able to actually do that, decide that you're going to turn this bad situation into something beautiful, like the lotus flower. You're a Buddhist. Tell us about this example, if you like, the lotus flower, where it grew, where it grows, what's the meaning, what's the metaphor?
Right. Well, the lotus flower is not like a typical flower. Most flowers bloom and then seed later, but the lotus flower blooms and seeds simultaneously. So it, I think probably thousands of years ago, this lotus flower was very symbolic in that, Buddhist thinking is that effects have causes, and that there's a simultaneous relationship between the two.
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect. And so the lotus flower itself symbolizes this simultaneity of the cause and effect happening at the same time, right? And so that's why I'm sure that the lotus flower was, the Lotus Sutra. I mean, we've heard about the lotus flower for millennia. And there's another interesting thing about lotus flowers. Another reason it's a great symbol is the most beautiful lotus flowers bloom from the muddiest swamps.
Why is that?
Well, there's more nutrients there, right? If you put the lotus flower in clean water, there's no nutrients for it to grow from. So the muckier, the more sewage, the more stuff in that water. It's like the lotus flower can draw all of these nutrients and blossom. So there's a great symbol here. We think, or most people think, that, or a lot of us think, I don't want to speak for everybody, There's a lot of enlightened people out there. That we can't be happy as long as we have all these problems in our life. If we could just get rid of the problems, then we could be happy, right? But if the lotus flower got rid of the swamp, it would get rid of its nutrients and it would die, right? So I know now, because of all my study and my personal experience with it, that it's this very swamp of our life that provides all the nutrients. Just like my bankruptcy delivering pizzas, it's the same thing. That was my swamp. From that swamp, I could now tap this inner understanding in a way that I could let it manifest in my life, not from my brain, but from my core, So, but it was triggered because of the depth of the swamp that I was in, right?
But you got out of the swamp.
I eventually climbed out of the swamp, but I used that swamp was the catalyst that actually gave me the fuel to burst free. Right?
Stepping stone.
The stepping stone. Okay. Now, we all want balance and harmony. For me, it wasn't a very balanced life. If I could only live in my van and I couldn't have comfort in a toilet and a shower, all these kinds of things. So, naturally, we want to enhance our life with these kinds of amenities so that we have more balance and more comfort, and we can get about pursuing our jobs and whatever we decided our mission might be. So, we all want to rise above that swamp. But the thing is, me for sure, and probably for a lot of people, is we don't really view the swamp as opportunity. We just view it as suffering. And so it's very easy to wallow in that because we can't see a way out. Maybe we've never heard about the concept. We maybe theoretically heard about it, but we can't do it. We're in the middle of this swamp and it doesn't feel good and we're drowning and we can't see any opportunity. We're just blind to it all, right? Any possibility.
Well, you're using the word happiness. But is there happiness? I think happiness is kind of a fleeting word, has a fleeting meaning. Maybe another word would be fulfillment, like serenity of some sort. Isn't happiness just saved for a few moments that exceed the average moment in our lives? Like happy moments,
right.
Continuous happiness.
I think most of us view happiness, again, relative to, whether we're in a swamp or not, or how good things might be going in our relationships or careers or whatever. But you're right. This level of absolute happiness that I've been alluding to does possess serenity and confidence and solitude and just fortitude, I meant to say, because it's a more enlightened kind of happiness. It's not relative to whether you have something or not, right? You could be dying in a hospital from some severe disease and be wallowing in your misery in your last days and literally discouraging everybody who gets near your room, your doctors and everybody, right? Or if somehow you've been working on this absolute happiness that's not relative to whether or not you've got this serious illness, you could spend your last breath inspiring people. And the doctors are going, wow, this guy fought to the last minute, and this is so inspirational. Which kind of person do we want to be? Right? I'd much rather be coming from that loftier level.
This is exactly what happened to my mother. As you know, I lost my mom at 89, less than a couple of weeks ago. And of course, during the last 5 or 6 weeks, she was unable to communicate verbally with the external world, but she had been in and out of hospitals for the last 6 or 7 months, and she was always smiling, always encouraging doctors and nurses to be able to find the strength to do their difficult jobs, thanking everybody, making friends everywhere, asking for their names, thanking them for their help during day and night. And she was always the favorite patient in every hospital she went in. Nurses came out of their way to tell her goodbye when my brother and I went there to pick her up and bring her back home. She never complained. She was always the teacher. She was a teacher, high school teacher, and she was encouraging people to the end. So an amazing example of love and love for life and love for people and encouragement. And I understand exactly what you're talking about.
And that's so beautiful, right? I mean, for whatever karmic reasons or whatever, she had to grapple with the issues that she had to grapple with. But somehow she rose above those issues, and to the extent of her capacity, sounds like she was determined to just lift people up and inspire people. Boy, that's the way I want to go out.
She was.
I want to go out that way. That's actually enlightenment.
Anastasia is an amazing person.
Right. So enlightenment isn't a function. This absolute happiness isn't a function of the problem. It doesn't, it's not that we can't attain this absolute happiness and this, so to speak, enlightenment, or in Buddhism we call it Buddhahood. It's the same kind of concept. Only if we don't have problems. That's what most people think. I can't be happy until I can get rid of my problems.
So I live in an Instagram world. Like everything's shiny and happy and
well, underneath the surface, they're using AI to create this yacht that they're standing on or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
So, but the point is that the problem. What most of us do is we let the problems and the difficulties and the obstacles determine our happiness and
define us.
The what?
Define us, perhaps.
Define us, yeah. That's again. This is all relative stuff. Now, it's fine to understand that in theory. The thing is, we need a practice to actually engage it. I think for example, if you're by yourself wallowing in your problems, it always helps to have a couple of positive people come over and visit you and
Absolutely.
Lift you up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if we don't have a defined Buddhist practice or any other religion, specific practices that we do, there are things that just normal things like having friends visit us and stuff that can lift us up, right? And so, even if we can't really, again, the problem is it's good to understand this stuff in theory. The difficult thing is trying to manifest it in our life. And these are the issues that I'm trying to address throughout the entire book, is how do we manifest this condition? We don't just need to understand it theoretically. We need to be able to live it, And your mom, it wasn't, she was, losing her abilities to communicate and all this sort of stuff. But somehow her mission that she had somehow crafted and, magnified in her life it lifted her up to her greater self, not her lesser self. And so when she exited, we're all going to pass away at one point. But when her point in time came, she wasn't coming from the lesser self. She was coming from the greater self. Now, she still had the problem. She didn't transcend the problem. The problem did not define her happiness because she had begun to tap into this absolute happiness. Yeah. And that's why, actually, she ended gloriously, inspiring people and everything. That's amazing. Now, it's a little hard to think about this stuff, but, at least from a Buddhist standpoint, everything's cause and effect. Now, when you go out at the end of your life, you want to go out negative and all that kind of stuff. I mean, when you go to bed at night, it's kind of like a mini death, but only lasts a few hours. But, when you wake up the next morning, you got the same amount of money in your bank account, maybe a little less with interest deductions and stuff. But, your muscles might be a little bit weaker, but basically you're the same person you wake up in the morning that you went to sleep with, right? So if we, in a similar kind of analogy, we get to the end of this life, we go to sleep, but when we wake up, in this case, a new existence, where do you think we're going to start from? Right from the causes we'd been making right up to the last minute. I mean, it's not, from a Buddhist perspective, and again, this is a deep subject to get into, and I don't really go into this deeply in the book, but when we wake up in the morning, we start exactly from where we left off. That's a healthy way for me to look at life and death. When I go out, I want to have been making the most value creative causes that I could have made right up to the very last minute.
So you can carry them to the next existence.
So if it's going to go over, I want it to come over on the positive side. Not I want to carry all that negative baggage. I don't want to go out complaining. Boy, that's the last thing I want to do. Right?
So are we carrying karma for previous existences, you think?
Yes. Now, that's a bit...
We heard it here first, guys.
Okay, this is a bit hard to wrap your brain around, right? Because
tell me about it.
We can understand things 2-dimensionally and 3-dimensionally, but when it starts getting into 4th, 5th, and 6th dimensions and quantum
we're
physics,
losing the ball. Yeah,
this is really hard to wrap our brain around. I mean, Einstein was grappling with stuff at this level, and probably most of us don't have an Einstein brain, right? So to be able to grasp it on this level, but. Let's just look at it from just this existence, right?
Okay.
So I think most people probably can understand or probably even believe that everything's cause and effect. We all know if we go to the gym rigorously and everything, we're going to get an effect from that. And it's stronger body, better look, better health, more dates, whatever it is we're looking for, like more respect or whatever. Right? So pretty much everybody understands cause and effect. That's why we go try to work hard or whatever, right? If we choose not to work hard and drink too much or overdo anything, we also get the effect of that, right? But in this existence, most people think, okay, I have control over that. If I don't seem to have the personal strength, then maybe I can go to some self-help classes or get some psychotherapy or something, some coaches to help me along this path. There's some things that we can do, like meditate or whatever one might have a proclivity to try. But I think it's pretty easy to understand, that we need to change the causes if we want to change the effects. So now we're getting into I think to talk about karma, we need to talk about 3 words that many people get confused.
Just 3?
Well, there's a lot, but these 3 related words, and that's karma, fate, and destiny.
Karma, fate, and destiny.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So many people, and again, a lot of religions support these things. And if we're born in certain religions, we kind of have this way of thinking because our parents thought this way and everything. But a lot of religions think that the destiny isn't something that the individual can control. It's like preordained or whatever, maybe by some power outside of ourselves.
The white bearded guy in the cloud with an iPod or something.
Yeah, well, yeah, But the point is that destiny, it connotes something that you don't really have any control over, right? And fate is very. This is my fate. Everything's pointing that this is going to happen to me. It's very similar to this concept of destiny, but karma is very, very different.
Flexible,
right? Because it is flexible, but we need to tap the wisdom and power to be able to tap into the flow of how to create value so that we create a better karma, right? So karma comes from the standpoint of cause and effect, right? So if we want to have a different effect, we've got to make a different cause. I mean, everybody, it's attributed to Einstein, I think, that, it's the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same old thing and think you're going to get a different result. Right. Keep eating all that fattening food.
It's a tribute to Einstein among hundreds of other quotes. Nobody knows the truth, but anyway, the quote is great.
Yeah. So, but now I have to throw in here that Buddhism has a long history. And there are earlier forms of Buddhism, where people worship statues and stuff as if they're gods outside of ourselves, very similar to other kinds of religions. Right. And so there's been an evolution in the Buddhist thinking as well. And many of these earlier forms are very, very prevalent in Southeast Asia, for example, today. But there are kind of like loftier levels of Buddhist understanding that don't place the power in entities outside of ourselves. In other words, the Buddha isn't something out there like a god or whatever you might want to call it, but the Buddha is everybody's a potential Buddha. We all have this enlightened side if we can figure out the tools to trigger, again, from this inner core, we can awaken our own enlightenment. So we're all potential Buddhas. So in this loftier, I say loftier, I'm not trying to pass judgment and, people of other forms of Buddhism. I'm not trying to denigrate anybody, but from a kind of a high perspective, if the power lies within us to change, then we're no longer dependent or pleading with power outside of us to give us good fortune and, all these kinds of things. And so at any rate...
But if the power lies within us, then lies also the responsibility, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This is the key foundation
of this is scary.
Well, it can be scary, but that's because if we haven't, stumbled into the paths that enable us to tap the power to direct our karma, then it's scary. But as we begin to tap that inner power and awakening, interestingly, scary I usually associate with fear, starts to disappear. Fear starts to go away. The scariness starts to go away once we start beginning to tap. And it's not like flip the light bulb flashes and we're enlightened overnight. But once this process, this orbit that we get into of developing this inner awakening, all the fear starts to gradually dissipate and go away. It almost makes us like fearless. It's not that we can't be responsible. We can't go walking blindly through traffic and we might get hit. We still have to use common sense. But there's a certain kind of like lack of fear that starts to manifest. Imagine an enlightened person, Buddha as you'd call him, or just, some great enlightened person, like great personages like Mahatma Gandhi and people like that who, my really developed a level of enlightenment. He didn't function from fear. The fear didn't exist. I can't really speak for him, but the point is that the direction of his life, because his mission was so great and he had tapping into this more enlightened side, he wasn't really functioning for fear. That's why he went on the Great Salt March and thousands of people were arrested. He just wasn't coming from fear, And there have been a lot of great personages like that who've been good examples. But
well, it is said that all of our decisions and actions in life and thoughts, consequently, come from either from one of two positions: the position of fear or the position of love. Anything that seems to be in between is like a little tiny, small piece of iron that eventually gets attracted to one of these poles. So,
well, it's. When you think about it, without going too deeply into it, I would imagine it's pretty hard to thoroughly love someone or anything if we really possess with a lot of fear. We're going to be fearing that they'll leave us, or, that the loved one will leave us or depart, or we'll lose the job or whatever it is, But at any rate, I wanted to, before we leave this subject of karma, so in relationship to my father, because this is like a really important transition point in my life. So when I bumped into Buddhist concepts and Buddhist thinking and started delving into studying this and started reading about this concept of karma, I could kind of really understand it in the context of my existence right now. But, why was I born into the family I was born into? Why did I have that father? Why was I born in this country instead of another, the color of my skin, why did all of this stuff happen? Well, according to Buddhist theory, there must be consistency from beginning to end. This is the kind of the law of nature. It can't just be in this existence and not, it's got to apply. Again, maybe we could... people could argue this point. But from a Buddhist standpoint, we did not show up in this existence as randomly. It's an effect. Everything is cause and effect. From the infinite time in the past to, immemorial to forever through the future.
So a choice?
Well, we can consciously grasp the idea of making choices in this lifetime, but boy, we can't remember those previous lifetimes. So rather than, this is the way I approached it. it was really hard for me to wrap my brain around past existences and the fact that I had made the causes to be born male instead of female, and the father that I had, and the circumstances, and being born in Texas and not in a mansion somewhere, and so it was really hard for me to wrap my brain around that. But kind of, you mentioned leap of faith. I thought, well, what am I going to lose if I just, at least theoretically, accept that, okay, I popped into this existence as an effect from causes I made. Now, just think about that a minute. And this actually gave me great comfort. If that's the case, then I chose my father. And now, again, just bear with me here. If I chose all my circumstances, well, I chose the causes to make in the infinite past. Effects manifested as a result. All of a sudden, the sperm and egg came in contact. I popped into this existence, and here are my circumstances. Buddhism postulates that this is not a random effect. This is an effect from specific causes, right? So let me continue this with one quick second. So if, again, I couldn't believe this. This was beyond, I'm from Texas, So, I'm kind of a redneck from Texas. Not that rednecks are bad, but it's like I was very narrow-minded in my thinking. So the bottom line is, with, my upbringing in part of the country I grew up with, most people weren't thinking like in California, where people do yoga and metaphysical things and meditation and stuff like that. I wasn't thinking about that kind of stuff at all. So it was hard for me to grapple with this. But what I did is I said, okay, well, let's just, instead of arguing it and getting stuck there, why don't I just assume that that's the case? What am I going to lose if I just assume that, okay, I chose my father? I chose my circumstances. What do I lose by just going ahead and accepting that? Right. And I pondered on that, and I realized I'm not going to lose anything. I mean, if it's true, I don't lose anything. I mean, if it's true, it gives me a great foundation to move forward with. If it's not true, well, what have I lost? I'm still in this world, in this existence, in this life, making causes that, I got to deal with, So even though it was hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that I had chosen my birth circumstances, I quickly realized I would lose nothing if I just kind of, temporarily at least, accepted that maybe that's true. And if it's not, I don't really lose anything, right? So I moved forward from there, not really, trying to understand the infinite past and figure out all those causes. That's impossible to do anyway. So I thought, okay, whatever I did, all those lifetimes, if there were any lifetimes, I popped up, but I chose my circumstances. Right. Now, from that standpoint, boy, everything started to change. Not overnight, but, when you think about it, if I chose my father, then why am I blaming him for giving me a problem? If I chose a father to give me a problem so that I could learn and grow, I got exactly what I wanted. I should be celebrating that. Now, I didn't have the life condition to celebrate it, but at least now the door was open for me to view my relationship with my father completely differently. Because now, nobody would condone his actions. Nobody, I'm not saying that. But here I was in my particular situation, but I asked for it. I chose it. I made all the causes to show up at that exact moment in time with that family, right? And so, boy, it's so much healthier. I mean, I was realizing then it was so much healthier for me to not harbor this blame, because I didn't grasp this initially, but that was why I was trying to kill myself by falling asleep, right? Because of all this blame. If I had some way could take responsibility for where I was in life, then I would eradicate the need to try to end the life, because I was only wanting to end my life subconsciously because I didn't have a path out of it. I didn't know how to solve it. But just instantly realizing that I chose all my negative circumstances, it took all the blame away.
Yeah.
Now, from that standpoint, for the next 20 years, I developed this concept. Not at first, it was just a state of mind and a state of intellectual understanding, but little by little, trying it with things, actually seeing the relationship with my father change became my actual proof. And it validated this concept of karma. And so it wasn't something I had to believe first for it to manifest. I just kind of like temporarily put the questioning of it on hold and just jumped into life. But over time, as I studied deeper and tried it with different things, actually saw my relationship. Because every time I'd encounter my father, originally I would always approach it from, the hatred and not hatred, but the anguish that I'd experienced. But all of a sudden, that anguish wasn't there. I could start enjoying him more and listening to his stories. It just gradually became a much richer kind of relationship. Fast forward 20 years later, after 2 decades of working on this, in the middle of these world travels, because we didn't mention it before, but after the pizza delivery gig, I literally was able to manifest a situation in my life where I traveled for 10 years straight. I would go back to Los Angeles 1 week a year just to go to the dentist or whatever. But during the middle of this period, around 1995 or so, my father's health started really deteriorating. And I was just booked, solidly traveling the world, working my way through this 110 countries and just booked solid on. So, I really had I realized I kind of needed to get back and see my father because he probably wasn't going to live very long. But, I was just so caught up in all the commitments and everything. Well, interestingly, according to the natural flow of the sequence of my trips and stuff, my 1 week I was in LA that year is the very week my father died. So clearly I had, this was blowing my mind because was connecting into some kind of universal rhythm so that I could actually have my last contact with him and not be out in Egypt or something like that when he died. And so interestingly, I was the one that discovered my father. And when I went into his house and went into the bedroom and, I knew he had died, there wasn't one iota of anguish and hatred. It was all gone.
Yeah.
It completely disappeared. And that's because I had stopped blaming him. And that's because I had started to incorporate this concept of personal responsibility through cause and effect. And that's why today I believe, we had previous existences, right?
Well, expanding what you just said, it's not just about your father. I mean, the reason being your father. So if this life we're living, the way we started, has to do with infinite choices in the past, then one has also chosen his country and the economy and the circumstances he was born with. And I can already hear some of the audience say, what was I thinking? I want my money back. Especially when, But if all these circumstances are your father, then we need to make a decision that's it, that's the baseline, and we're starting from there. So we can become friends with it, or we can become enemies with this situation and start embracing it and not let ourselves, metaphorically speaking, fall asleep on the wheel of our own life, by take personal responsibility and make changes, even little by little, even if they seem imperceptible and not Instagram worthy immediately. And that's the essence. During the last few days, I've started reading again a book that I read last summer, which I think it's the ultimate book about personal responsibility, The School of Gods by Elio Deana. It's a huge book. It's 570 pages. And last August, it took me almost a week to finish it. And I'm a voracious reader. So when I finished the book, I knew beyond any doubt that everything that is happening to me is my responsibility. Not my fault. No guilt, but responsibility. At least the way I would be responding to everything. And I think it's a great book for someone to read and really take into account that his own actions, his own thoughts, his own what he says, what he does, and what he practices is what determines, at least to some extent, the from now on way of his life. And you're talking about personal responsibility a lot in your book. How long has this book lived in your mind before you started typing?
Well, consciously, people don't know this who are listening to this podcast, but you've been trying to get me to write a book for years, right?
I think hammering is the right word.
Hammering is the right word. But there was a trigger. I have a friend who came into contact with Buddhism through my connection and him talking with me and everything. And he's an avid reader of self-development books. And he was at one of our discussion gatherings, and he mentioned Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now.
Right.
And so I thought, wow, he knew a lot about it. He read it several times, and I thought, boy, that would be, the power of now is like a very Buddhist concept, the present moment, making causes now, effect manifests later, the lotus flower, that whole thing. So I thought, it would be, rather than just, looking at myself, I thought, what if I suggest to him that he and I make a presentation at the next discussion gathering on the concepts in that book, The Power of Now.
Buddhist discussion gathering.
It was Buddhist discussion gathering, but Tolle's book is not about Buddhism, but it really embraces a lot of Buddhist concepts, and so something that the Buddhist people gathering at that meeting would be very interested to know about, and it would give my friend an opportunity to actually take some action. Inspire others and that sort of thing through, instead of just reading it for himself, he would be sharing all this stuff. So I thought, this is great, And so, I quick bought the book and read it, and he and I made this presentation. This was about a year ago. And at the end of that meeting, it finally crystallized. Now is the time for me to write this book. And, and I'm an experienced writer. I'd written a love story novel. I'd won an award on it for best first book fiction the year that I was first published. So I had some experience writing.
The title of the book was?
The Journey from Kamakura.
Okay.
And it's about my life, but I fictionalized it all, so it's really dramatic. People dying and all kinds of stuff. I'd hired tutors and stuff, and I'd kind of really learned how to write. As a fiction writer, so I wasn't starting from scratch in terms of writing this book. But I wanted to. I knew it needed to be a broadly presented book so that it wasn't just, my experience is the Buddhist path that I fell into, but most of the people who read the book probably aren't Buddhist and might not even be interested in being Buddhist. But there are certain universal concepts about the sanctity of life and harmony and balance and all kinds of things that are Buddhist, part of my Buddhist insights that I've discovered that people can really relate to. So then I came up with the concept of crafting a book that would tie in psychology, behavioral science, human nature, along with these Buddhist insights. So it's not just a book about Buddhism. It kind of blends everything together. And then, coincidentally, I just happen to have this great friend, Giannis, who personally possesses 1,300 self-help and entrepreneurial books, right? You've read everything. And so, you could point me to more books I could read and all this kind of stuff. And very quickly, you wanted to see my first draft, and it was only psychology and behavioral science. And you're going, boy, this book is never going to sell if you don't put your life into this book. And because I was just quoting platitudes. You were really great at spotting the platitudes. You read every platitude in the world, and because you read all these books, so you know what's a platitude and what's not a platitude. If it's just theoretical understanding, but people can't really do it, then it's like a platitude. It's all stuff you can't disagree with, but how do you live it, right? And so what you encouraged me that, you got to put your life into this. All these struggles and this, in a way, you'd think, boy, my ego comes to play. Do I really want people to know about all this stuff? I went through it and everything. And it was, kind of a humbling experience, but also part of my process of grappling with the ego and everything. So I dove into it. And, you probably read the book 2 or 3 times as I was writing it and kept saying, incorporate this, incorporate that.
Back and forth.
Yeah, it was an amazing adventure. So, again, I'm thanking you very much for that. But at any rate, that's how it evolved, And then I tied, it wasn't difficult. That resolution I made in 1990 in the middle of the pizza delivery thing about why I'm on this earth, what's my mission. Now, next month I'm 80 years old, right. And, If I'm lucky, my mom's 104, so I probably got 24 more years at least, right? But who knows? Men tend to die younger than women, right? But, I'm kind of in this last segment of my life. I've been around the world so many times, and I mean, there's still 80 more countries to see or whatever, but so it's not over. But and I have lots of energy and youthful spirit and everything. But I realized that this book is just another aspect of being able to, in my own kind of way, good or bad, to make some kind of effort to inspire people, in a kind of a non-sectarian kind of way, but just through my own personal experience. So in that sense, the book became a very different kind of self-development book. I mean, every other chapter is kind of a memoir of, So what I did is I chose events in my life, some of them quite dramatic, and all of them quite meaningful, and things that I learned, people I met, and the wisdom I kind of got on the road that reinforced all my Buddhist studies and stuff. And so I incorporated that, showed the weak side, how I grappled with it, and the process that I went through to start to elevate myself from that. And so I would choose a memoir chapter about, complaining or some subject, and then I would show how that played out in my life, like the ego and destroying my marriages and stuff. And then the very next chapter was slightly more academic, but making references to psychology studies and more Buddhist insights and perspectives so that they reinforce each other. So in that sense, it's very differently presented than most self-development books, because it's really, in a real heartfelt kind of way, is showing the process from loss to gain, from developing, from transitioning, how this process from gaining this insight about the karmic responsibility, this transition that happened, and showing the readers, how I was so focused on relative happiness and the process I went through and the thinking and the causes I made and everything to start to manifest this more, this broader, loftier self kind of aspect of absolute happiness. It's an ongoing process, by the way. It's never over, and you never can become too enlightened. In fact, the more enlightened, if you're really getting more enlightened, you just realize how unenlightened you are, right? So, but at any rate, so it's an ongoing process. And anyway, in that sense, I wanted to just craft an experience for the readers to maybe start thinking about insights maybe they never perceived. And, they're going to have to take their own personal responsibility to begin to maybe challenge. Everybody's got their own proclivities or whatever. Just reading a book's not going to change your life completely. It's a first step, so I'm not saying don't do it.
Well, there is the hero's journey, and you're certainly the hero of this book. But in the hero's journey established by Joseph Campbell, the hero is living in his maybe in the village, cultivating vegetables and everything, and then there is a challenge that the dragon is coming to the village, or he has to go save a princess, or get the Lord of the Rings. In Lord of the Rings, he has to go after the ring, and in the beginning he refuses because he underestimates his hidden powers. Then gradually, for any reason at all, be it a bankruptcy or whatever catalytic event might happen in his life, he's accepting the challenge and goes out of his comfort zone and starts challenging the future in a way. And in the course of things, both friends and mentors and help and also adverse situations appear, testing him and having him going up and down. And you certainly had all those, your fair share of all these situations. And many, I've read the book, of course, during all these period of time, and there are so many events of people, about people that you met during your travels, because travel is much more than going to other countries and seeing the countryside or the landmarks and visiting museums and eating at restaurants. It's about meeting people, local people, and having person-to-person encounters with them, and benefiting from their philosophy, their way of life, the way of thinking, giving and taking, and teaching and being taught, and exchanging views and value. And you've told me about so many of these guys you've met, people you've met. If I'm spelling it correctly, it's there is a young guy, Nguyen Thanh in Vietnam. Am I spelling it correctly?
It's Nguyen Thanh.
Okay, I got it 50%, 30%.
And I'm not Vietnamese, so I'm probably mispronouncing it.
Okay, so would you like to tell us about him? He's in your book. You're describing things you lived with him.
Well, I didn't live with him.
Experienced.
Encountered him on a trip. Really, the duration of our friendship was a week or 10 days, something like that. So I was in Vietnam. I'd been there many times before. And each time, I visit a place, I try to dig deeper, photograph different things, and have, deeper and more meaningful experiences. And I must interject here. I had this amazing experience with young Nguyen Thanh, who was 10 or 11 years old. And one of the reasons it was so meaningful, and, I didn't go into this in the book, but I'll share it now. I had a child from my first marriage, a son, and I was not a very good father because I was just into myself. That marriage didn't last very long, and I didn't play a role in my son's life at all. Sadly, he had a genetic disease, and his name was Kevin. And he passed away a few years ago from this. Now, this experience with Nguyen Thanh happened in the mid 90s or late 90s. So my son hadn't passed away by then. But because of this, my development, again, from these Buddhist insights and stuff, I was beginning to realize that I never played an active role in trying to develop the relationship with my son, because it was like something I wanted to forget. It was an old chapter. I was long before I was a Buddhist that I ever, that marriage ended. And
that was for your first marriage? That
was from my first marriage. And so the reason I wanted to give that as a background is that when I encountered young Nguyen Thanh in Nha Trang, Vietnam, by then I was, starting to see the value of youth, and I could see, a nurturing thing that I had never developed in my life. And so this kid was really different. This was in the early 90s. I think Americans first started going back to Vietnam, after the Vietnamese War I think it was 1993. So it was fairly new. And Vietnam wasn't very well developed. So all the kids were entrepreneurs. They were out there selling baskets and postcards and, all kinds of stuff. The postcard was $1, right? And it was probably only worth 15 cents back then. And so every kid approached, and they had all learned some English. So they had practiced their spiel, and they just, they'd come at you from all different directions, So I was at a restaurant, an outdoor restaurant, and this kid comes along, and I could see his bag of postcards there, but he didn't offer to sell me any. And
how come?
I didn't know. And I thought, why not? Because I expected it. I mean, I've been around the block a couple of times. I could spot these hawkers coming from everywhere and every scam and everything, right? And so I was intrigued by that he hadn't offered to sell me anything. I thought, it's coming, But then he just learned a better strategy to sell postcards, and that's why he's not going to hit me with it with the first breath, right? So we talked a little bit, and I was really impressed by his open mind, and he was so excited that I was American. And I kind of, when I went to Vietnam the first time, I really expected animosity. I mean, we obliterated their country, and My Lai massacre and all of this stuff. I just expected all kinds of hatred and animosity. I'm coming from the West, where we blame everybody, right? And I didn't feel anything like that in this kid's life, and so I was intrigued by that, and we talked for a while. He still didn't try to sell me any postcards. And so I said, why don't you join me? We'll have a bowl of soup and a noodle soup. And he said, sure. And he's so polite, and he was just so youthful and exuberant and loved America, and he knew all the names of all the capitals of the states, and it was just like blowing me away, And in the course of events, I discovered that his grandfather had died of Agent Orange. I get kind of emotional when I think about this, But here was this kid, influenced by a war that he wasn't even born yet, And you know what? He wanted to be a doctor. And so I asked him why, and he said, to keep people from dying.
Oh.
I'm going, whoa, this is like...
Okay, that's amazing.
Excuse me for getting a little bit emotional, but boy, this was really touching my life. And also coming from the standpoint that I'd never kind of really developed this kind of relationship with my own son. And this was my opportunity to start rectifying this part of my life, right? And so every day, Nguyen came by. Nguyen is his last name. Tan is his first name. So Tan kept coming by and come and have some more soup. He always had his bag of postcards. I could see him down the street selling them, but never tried to sell me any. And he told me that Nguyen was his family name. Tan is the second word, but it's his first name. I said, well, you can call me Glenn. No, Mr. Glenn. It's always Mr. Glenn. So we had this incredible relationship, this bond, and I was learning so much from this kid. I was so impressed that he didn't have bitterness. He hadn't learned bitterness. And this gave him all this freedom, opened him up for dreams and stuff. And this was like, oh, wow. And with my motivation to try to want to give hope and inspiration, this is like I could like share these kinds of things.
How old was he again?
I did 10 or 11 or 12, something like that. And maybe 12. Because he's very wise for his age. And so at any rate, the week came to an end, and he'd become my tour guide and took me. We have bicycle cyclos there, and so we get on the front, and we were being pedaled around town. So he took me to all the sites and showed me everything. It was just so beautiful. What an amazing experience! I'm going, I can't believe I never allowed this to happen in my life before.
So what do you think happened in his life? How did he or his circumstances turn the potential poison into potential medicine?
Well, I think fundamentally, being a Southeast Asian country, their kind of like spiritual thinking isn't based on an eye for an eye. I think that from the standpoint of karma, I think in general, I'm making a flat statement here, but the Vietnamese just, the way I see it is they just must have realized that it was their karma. They got bombed. And so they, rather than harbor all this blame, let's build some televisions and sell televisions to America. I mean,
look at the future.
You look at the future, right? Instead of harboring all this. And boy, that just is so healthy. Because as we look at wars going on currently in the world, we see this eye for an eye. You hit me, I'm going to hit you back 10 times harder.
All the time.
That doesn't really exist in these Buddhist-oriented countries. Like in America, you spill hot coffee on yourself at McDonald's, you can sue them for $2 million. In Vietnam, they would say, you ought to watch how you're drinking your coffee. I mean, it's like, they don't have this concept of payback and, make you pay and blame and all that kind of stuff. So I think the kid was taught differently by his grandparents and his father and all this sort of stuff. And he didn't have all this bitterness. I mean, he was so young. All he saw is entrepreneurship and people selling noodles and now TVs on the street. And he just was moving forward. Clearly, he had, his grandfather died of Agent Orange. He knew about this. And it affected him in a way that he wanted to be a doctor so he could save humanity kind of thing. So it wasn't like it didn't play a role in his life. He just wasn't harboring all that blame.
Right.
And I thought, boy, if the whole world could live like this, we would really have world peace, right? So this even cemented my bond with him.
Let's take a quick moment to thank our friends at Hellenic Design Center, where this podcast was filmed, the people who bring the design thinking methodology to life. Design thinking is a creative and practical way to tackle challenges and spark fresh ideas in any business or organization. If you're looking for tailored solutions or inspiring workshops that energize your team, HDC can help you get there. Just drop them a line using the email you see on your screen.
So it came to the last day, I had to leave, and Tan and I made a pact that he would show up at my hotel and go with me to the airport and see me off. And, I gave him the time and everything. We're going to go on a bicycle cyclo. And so I'm waiting out. I got already reserved the cyclo. The guy's waiting to pedal me away. And the clock is ticking. I got to get there for my flight. And Tom just wasn't showing up. And so I started, maybe he had an accident or something happened. And even the thought crossed my mind is maybe he was a phony after all. And then I go, that couldn't possibly be true because of the bond that I'd established with him. And so, I just, I had some anxiety, but I had to say goodbye to him. I couldn't leave. I was thinking, I'll cancel my flight and go tomorrow. I got to go find out what's happened to him. And then off in the distance, I see this little kid. He had borrowed a bicycle, way too big for him, and he's pedaling like mad down the street, and he's running late because it took him a while to get the bicycle and everything. He pedaled up, Mr. Glenn. So I just had this moment of relief that he was safe and everything. So we went to the airport, and it was kind of difficult to say goodbye, but I wasn't coming from the standpoint of any loss, because I knew this kid, he's going to have a great future, and everything I was trying to encourage him with was pointing toward that, towards encouraging him to live that kind of life. And so so at the very last minute, back then you could kind of people could go into the airport and wave at you out the window and stuff. You can't do that now, but so at the last minute I looked over and I saw. To cry again. Saw this bag of postcards, and he still hadn't tried to sell me any. And so they're $1 a piece. And so I bought 100 postcards. I had lots of money back then. And he didn't want to, he wanted to give them to me. I said, no, I'm buying them, I also bought him a little camera, because I wanted him to, maybe he can document his life, somehow, his experience. And so at any rate, it was this beautiful culmination of a bond. And I realized that I had kept myself from experiencing that so much in my life. I mean, I'd had some great connections with people, but that's what I wanted to develop. I wanted to keep pursuing that. And this is reason to keep traveling and to battle. I've had some health issues the last couple of years and stuff, to battle all these kinds of obstacles that come up, because I've got a mission and I've got something. It's not just for me. I'm sure that, I was determined that Ton's going to, after I left, he's going to solidly go after his dream to become a doctor. He's probably a doctor by now, I have to go back there and search him and find out, now that I need doctors, right? But, it really, that experience, it really, really opened my life. Not, I understood this stuff intellectually, but this is a real core, human, moving, tear-jerking kind of experience, that's so real. Now it's it's tangible, actual proof of how you can feel and the impact that you can have if you put out efforts to rise from your lesser self, to magnify this greater self.
Right.
Excuse me. Let me wipe my eyes here so we can keep going.
That's okay.
All these stories are just going to become a crybaby throughout the whole thing.
Don't worry about it. They're amazing stories, and I had the chance to, read about them when you were reading your proofs and everything. And you've lived mostly in Southeast Asia. That's the area you've been operating most of this time. I mean, many of the experiences of the book are happening in the East.
Well, there's one with Amadou and Timbuktu that was in Africa. That was a very meaningful experience, and some others. And the first 10 years of my quest to become, develop as a travel photographer, I needed to see the world, because there are icon images around the world, that the Sydney Opera House and all this sort of stuff. So that first 10 years, I
was shooting for an agency.
Yeah, I was shooting for Getty Images. And by the way this works in the stock photo industry, it's been restructured quite a bit over the last 3 decades. But when I started in the early 90s, is the agency does the marketing and the policing and the organizing and the mailing out images and all of that kind of stuff, control of model releases and stuff like that. But the photographer creates the image and incurs whatever expense is involved to create that image. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. The photographer goes, creates his image. Maybe he's a medical photographer or portraits or shoots dogs, or in my case, I shot travel. So I have to go finance my own travels. And so I produce the imagery, give that to the library, in this case Getty, and then they do the marketing, and it was a 50-50 split. These days, you don't get 50-50, right? And
the industry has changed, shifted quite a bit.
And that's a whole other story we won't get into. So after I went to Africa and, every corner of the world, you looped the world many, many times during all this, going to these 100 or so countries. And I keep adding them too, but not as frequently as I did back then. Somehow I got really intrigued by Southeast Asia.
Attracted? Intrigued?
Intrigued.
Okay.
And I think primarily is because of their kind of like Buddhist mentality of not blaming people and taking personal responsibility. It's kind of really fit in my life. That's the way I lived my life. And I kind of didn't like going back to America where everybody was blaming everybody for everything and suing everybody.
Direct opposite.
Yeah. So, I got really attracted, and I got acclimated to the weather and stuff like that. And so I have just been roaming that part of the world. Well, after I finished the 90s, I've been back there. I've been to some other places, but mostly I just kind of keep going back through. It's a huge place. I must have been to India so many times, 50 times, 60 times. I can't even count it anymore. So because I just, it's so big and so broad, and there's so many cities and many, many languages spoken there and everything. So there's no end to how long you could even if you just wanted to see India, you could never do it in a lifetime. And there's many, many countries. The other thing is that 10 years on the road, I lost everything in a bankruptcy. And so when I went on the road, I just had one suitcase and a camera bag and a laptop, right? And so by necessity, I lost everything. But you can't travel with a lot of stuff. And I didn't have any money to store anything. And of course, I didn't have anything to store because I lost it all in the bankruptcy, my couches and furnitures and cars and stuff. So and I needed to stay on the road. The more images I shot, the more money I'd make, because the more icons I'd photograph. And another good thing is because, when you run a business, you can deduct your business expenses, your office rent and stuff like that. So with me, if I kept a house in LA, once I got to a point where I could afford it, that wouldn't be a tax deductible item. But if I stay on the road, all my hotels and my meals and, everything, laundry and everything is completely tax deductible. Plus it's an investment back into my own career. I get more images, make more money, that sort of thing. So there was an incentive to stay on the road. And the only reason I slowed down is, along the way, I got mugged in Moscow, and I had my camera stolen in Sumatra, and I almost drowned in Puerto Vallarta, almost got trapped in an avalanche in Tibet. And just all this stuff was happening.
I'm guessing it goes with the territory.
Yeah. This stuff happens when you're out there every day, right? And so all my friends would say, you got to write a book, you got to write a book. And I didn't know anything about writing books. And this was before Kindle, and you could get ebooks, and none of that existed back then. So I was buying paperbacks, even used paperbacks wherever we were going. I'd read them, and because I had to learn how to write. And so I read 200 paperback books, fictional books. And so my first draft of The Journey from Kamakura had 200 styles in it. It was just a terrible mess, right?
When did you start traveling all this? When did you start all this roaming around the world?
That started in 1990.
1990, and so, we met in 1993.
Right. So it's really right in the beginning of it, right? I had just started to begin to make a little bit of money then. Mm-hmm. I don't think I had taken my first trip around the world yet. I was getting ready for that. That happened shortly thereafter.
Not sure. We met in August 1993.
August 2nd, yeah, right. So I got this vagabond nomad kind of lifestyle embedded into my life. I started out of necessity, but then I loved it. And I didn't have possessions and goldfish and coffee pots and TVs and mortgage payments and car payments and insurance, and none of that stuff existed. Everything I spent was all tax deductible. So why go back home? And, I was on permanent holiday. Could life get any better than this, to have a job that you love and you're meeting all these people? And because I'd making some money there, so I could eat better meals. And boy, this was like a holiday that never ended. Yeah. And I was discovering myself and meeting kids like Tan and, having all these experiences. What a rich life. I didn't want to stop. So today I'm still a vagabond after 35 years.
I can surely see the appeal, because when I met you in 1993 in Santorini on the 2nd of August, I was there to shoot stock with a friend of mine. And I had a life in a little studio in Thessaloniki. But when I came back, all I wanted to do is pack a bag and become a travel stock photographer of some sort, because I knew that I would love this life. Not being attached to stuff, but then, proclivities from the past where...
Well, Giannis, it's 32 years later. You read the book 3 times already.
Yeah.
So get your bottom end in gear and get out there on the road.
I'm packing my bags.
So at any rate, that's, now I must say that at the end of the 90s, Photoshop had kicked in, the internet was getting live, and by then Getty was requiring that the photographer do all the back-end work because it was film images needed to be scanned, and so there was a bunch of Photoshop, so I had to learn Photoshop and stuff. So I bought a condo in LA at the end of the 90s, hired a couple of young students to teach me Photoshop, did that for about a year, and I had to get the hell out of there because I was like getting so bored. I had to, so I was never at my house, and I went back on the road traveling, and eventually produced the book. This is why you came in 2002. At the end of that year, The Journey from Kamakura was published, which, by the way, I rewrote last year before I finished Hidden Powers.
Completely or re-edit?
Completely rewrote it. Right. And, well, first of all, I was just going to go, back then we were talking about film and CDs and stuff that doesn't exist today, right? Yeah. And so I wanted to kind of clean all that up.
So you adapted it to...
Yeah, I wanted to adapt that. But then along the way, I realized I needed to add backstory. I'd already halfway through writing Hidden Powers. And so, I was just... I was having an editor look at a couple of chapters, and that was taking her a long time. So I had nothing to do, and I thought, okay, once I got into reworking The Journey from Kamakura, I just rewrote virtually everything to make it more dynamic, and I put in backstory. So it's a completely more current kind of book now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But then you're mentioning other stories like the meeting Desmond Tutu in Bali, which Bali played a significant role in your life because you built a house there, you built an estate, you had created a base for a certain period of time, and then things changed again. But Desmond Tutu is one of the people that seems to have influenced you.
Just a quick backstory. I have a degree in architecture, and I never practiced. And at the end of about 2005 or whatever, I'd made maybe $3 million in stock photo royalties. My photographs through Getty were published more than 100,000 times. So I was generating quite a bit of passive income. Even if I didn't work, all these images were still being sold. So this money was just still gushing in. And so I realized that if I didn't finally design something, maybe this lifetime would pass by and I would never utilize all that great training I had. I mean, I was really never a practicing architect, so I didn't really know how to do it. And back then, I used to draw with T-squares and stuff, and now it's all computer CAD drawings and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff I needed to learn. So I had enough money to build anything I wanted. Well, I didn't have that much money. Had a spare $1 million sitting around, and that wouldn't build something really, really, really grand in the States because things cost too much. But I'd been to Bali many, many times. I love the culture there, and because of the nature of things being so cheap, I discovered that construction costs are 10% of what it would cost to build something in the States, right? And so, I thought, okay, I'm going to take half my money. Again, not a businessman. Take half my money and build this amazing place. And I had an underlying reason. I knew a guy who owned the best catering company in Bali, and he worked with a lot of wedding planners, and they were using a lot of private, high-end villas for wedding venues. And I knew I had to have more business acumen and invest my money wiser. And so he told me that if I built this really, really high-end estate, a retreat kind of place, that I could rent it out for weddings. And that the way it works is you have a 1-week wedding where the wedding couple stays there for a week. They pay $25,000 for that. And he said I could have a wedding every single week throughout the year.
There was a business underlining.
Yeah, man, I could make, when I wanted to go out traveling and be my nomad again, I could make $100,000 that month, right? So this was going to be an amazing investment, right? And, but there were a couple things happened. Digital cameras came, the internet came. Suddenly there were trillions of images on the internet. Well, you can imagine the value went way, way, way down. And then the global economic recession happened in 2008. I'm halfway into this thing. Because I'm not a businessman, my $500,000 investment became $1 million. Now I had spent all my money. And then the world stopped. And stock photography dropped. I was making $25,000 a month. It dropped to
plus Bali time.
Everything was taking a long time. My stock photo income from Getty dropped to $100 a month or something. Yeah, just like it was nothing. So I tapped credit cards because I had this machine going here. I'd become the general contractor. I had 120 workers. I mean, this was a grand place. 21 levels of water, inverted pyramids, underground rivers, and art galleries. I mean, this was going to be an amazing place. And so I just let my dreams go wild. And again, no business sense. So when something happened outside of my control, this global economic recession, it shut down the whole world. I'm halfway done. And now I can't sell it, right? So, and then before I knew it, I was tapping credit cards to keep this, my 120 staff. I used to have 5, now I have 120, trying to keep this thing going because it's at this point I couldn't stop. It was into it too deep. And before I knew it, I'm way, way deep into credit card debt. And it took 10 years to sell this thing. So you can imagine what that next 10 years was
I remember the estate because I spent I spent some time there in 2013.
Is that 3 or 4 years after I left? Yeah.
Right. I stayed with you for 5 months trying to find part of my self-development in Bali. I moved from Thessaloniki to Bali for 5 months, and then I came back to Thessaloniki, having been enriched in ways that I couldn't thought possible in the beginning. But yeah, I do remember the estate and the whole underlying mentality and everything. It was a great plan. So when someone is on the road for so many years, you develop certain mentalities and certain ways of life and acting and thinking and persevering that are not available to the person that lives in the city. You're living out of a suitcase and a photographic bag, and how is that feeling different? Do you think, what was the response of your friends during that time that were still living in the city with their families, working in cubicles under the company label? Did you have any encounters with those people? What were they telling you? What were they advising you?
Well, a few of them said, when I'm ever going to get a real job, right?
Yeah.
But let me tell you, I had actual proof. I mean, eventually, I made a lot of money and was building this amazing house in Bali and everything. So it was kind of, nobody could really question it at that point that, I would get a real job because whatever I was doing was working.
Show me the money.
And you show me the money, and I was showing it to him, right? And I was living the life and doing all this stuff and no obligations, still no goldfish, still one suitcase. And, I realized that now everybody chooses their own path. I chose to not have...
consciously or unconsciously, or both?
Consciously. For example, we want a partner, and we choose to get married. We choose to have families. We got to support that. We need a 9-to-5 job, and we're too young for retirement, so we got to work, and so we kind of choose a path. And lots of happy marriages out there. People really, really enriched with all the dynamics of that. A lot of unhappy people as well. That's why the divorce rate is so high. But my path, kind of as a solo artist kind of thing, is I had always wanted to get out from under those kinds of obligations. And also, interestingly...
Was this instinctual? Sorry to interrupt.
Well, not...
Or conscious?
Well, as it unfolded, it became a conscious thing that I wanted to perpetuate, For example, my Buddhist practice over all these decades, now 52 years doing it, I don't really have fear. I don't really have stress. I don't really have anxiety because I function, I go bankrupt and have to deliver pizzas, and I rebirth myself. And I lost my Bali project, and I rebirth myself. And I'm turning 80 years old next week, and I'm starting a 20-year trip, and that'll get me to 100. I mean, I'm just always constantly rebirth. So I never wanted to me, obligations and things were like, quote, encumbrances. But to most people, they're not.
So is this the ultimate flexibility?
Yeah, but I'm not suggesting that would work for everybody because in my particular case, I don't get lonely.
Well, nothing works for everybody.
Yeah, right. And I'm just saying in my case. So I'm just saying this is my life. I told about it in the book, and I'm not suggesting people try to go live that life. It probably would be a disaster for most people. But this is just my experience and what I went through it and what I learned. All the you can still get depth of learning and all this self-awakening, whether you're doing the crazy way, all my friends thought I was a fanatic, what I mean, crazy guy, some eclectic guy, But, there are a lot of people that have such rich lives with their families and kids, and there's such a beautiful kind of thing.
That's great.
It's absolutely great. So I'm not suggesting people kind of go adopt my lifestyle or whatever, but in the context of however we choose to live our life, we still have issues like, is our happiness based on relative things or absolute? All these same kinds of issues we got to grapple with, no matter how we want to orchestrate our life, right?
Well, what you're advocating is that circumstances don't determine our destiny.
Absolutely not. Now, that when you're armed with tools, which I talk a lot about in the book, not just platitudes, but real tools.
Tools such as?
Well, let me complete my thought, and then I'll mention that. When you're armed with these tools and perspectives, then the difficulties and the obstacles and the challenges don't become roadblocks. They become fuel for where you want to go. But how do you activate this? We all know we ought to activate our inner life force. How do you do it? I mean, a lot of books I read, they talk about some things that are all valuable, like writing gratitude, keeping a gratitude notebook and a journal, gratitude journal, and appreciating all the things that you do have. And these are all really valuable things. Some people take cold showers to wake up and get going. But a lot of these kind of avenues of pursuit are kind of superficial. They don't necessarily...
Too mechanical?
Taking a cold shower in the morning will definitely wake you up. Will it help you activate the power to change your karma that causes you to have cancer or whatever? Probably not, right? So what people really want is a way to activate the inner power, the hidden powers. And the other second half, the subtitle of the book is Hidden Powers, How to Transcend Suffering, not how to get rid of it. Because I say in the book, I explain how that suffering actually, without it, we can transform it into this great life condition, right? So we transcend the suffering. We don't necessarily eliminate the problems.
So the initial suffering is a given.
Well, look, life is gonna be full of difficulties. In Buddhism, it talks about birth, old age, sickness, and death. These are like the four sufferings of life, so to speak. So we can't escape.
The four horsemen.
Yeah, we can't escape the realities of stuff. I mean, our bodies get old. We eat all these hormones and pesticides and stuff, and no wonder we get cancer. I mean, stuff happens to us, right? So the key thing is, since this stuff's going to happen anyway, just because even if we don't realize we shouldn't have been eating all that stuff, we did somehow, and then we wind up with cancer. Now, when it hits, when the cancer hits or whatever the obstacle might be, what's our life condition? Are we go into pits of misery and suffering because our whole life has been built around this relative happiness stuff, and now it's all gone, so, we're losing our life and we're losing everything? Or have we somehow found a path to open up the doors to tapping this absolute power, this kind of inner condition of awakening or Buddhahood, so to speak.
So it's there. All we have to do is tap it.
Yeah. Now, again, I must say, I didn't write this book to get everybody to be a Buddhist, but I have to talk a little bit about it in the book.
Absolutely.
Because it was the path I chose.
Yeah, give us the framework.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the purpose of the book is to be an avenue for people to start looking at possibilities and viewing obstacles and things different. At least we got to start with getting our mind on that path. How to activate it at the core, this is where these tools I just mentioned start coming into play. So if somebody, you only go so far doing it intellectually. At some point you got to go to the gym and lift the weights to get those muscles. You can't just read about them.
Yeah, well, I think that going to the gym is more natural to us, but life is the big gym, and using adversity to overcome personal challenges is something that doesn't really resonate with many people because it's tiring, it's painful. It challenges established beliefs and assumptions that everything should be going pretty much well, and why am I tried under these circumstances? I don't want to. I want my peace of mind. So people are not really I'm guessing that the majority of people are not really, are reluctant at least, to jump into challenges just for the sake of it, in order to be enlightened or make themselves better, or, unless all these new challenges obey some already established realities, like being an athlete, going to the gym, or, reading a few books. But would someone try to challenge himself or herself too much if he or she knew that maybe in the end she might not be able to rise over the circumstances that she created herself?
Okay, so first of all, I want to say, even though I've been grappling and dealing with these kinds of things for this last 5 decades, I'm not asking for more problems. I mean, none of us want these more problems, right? But come on, they're coming. Stuff's happening. I mean, last year I had developed heart disease and clogged arteries and type 2 diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis and cataracts. And now I have macular degeneration. I can hardly see. It's really hard for me to read. I can't see the periods at the end of the sentence. So age and stuff causes all this stuff. So stuff's coming, not just health, but life things change. Everything, the only constant is everything changes, right? So when this change happens and it, this adversity arises, it's so crucial to have the meaning of our life not be dependent on whether there's adversity or not. That absolute level of happiness that can be manifested through, all of these tools and things that I'm talking about, can actually enable you to manifest a life condition, not a mental condition. That's just positive thinking. It's hard to keep positive, right? But when the crap really hits the fan, it's the life condition that's important. It's possible, and me and a lot of people are pursuing these avenues and showing that it actually can be done. That's why all these examples are in the book, to show it actually can be done. When we start to tap into that inner hidden power, it's hidden until we start to tap it. Then it becomes manifest. People can actually see it.
It becomes obvious.
Becomes obvious because there's actual proof, right? And the harder it is, the harder the adversity, the more meaningful the actual proof is. I watched that guy going from the rock bottom, and he tried everything, and every obstacle in the world hit him, and he never gave up. There is a real value in battling stuff, right? Now, we're not looking for it.
Yeah, but aren't most people looking at such a case as an exception, rather than not the rule, but something that far exceeds their daily capacity to transform?
Well, that's the way I looked at it, as an exception. And so I started out, as you mentioned earlier, step by step, grappling with the first thing I learned about Buddhism was this blame thing, and came into this life having already chosen stuff. Once I started incorporating these little steps at a time, even though I didn't believe it, didn't want to believe it, but just thought, what am I going to lose if I just accept it and move on with it? This transformation started to happen. And the actual proof is the way I ended my relationship with my father. Beautiful.
So there was a transitional period for you too.
Well, we all go through this trans. You don't just snap into enlightenment, like the light bulb. I mean, this is it's forged.
It's not a switch on the wall.
No, this has to be forged. The problem is that sometimes the necessary forging that's required, none of us want to go through that, because we don't want to be pounded that hard, because we don't really know how to tap those inner powers and stuff like that. Swords, a mighty sword, is created by sledgehammering it, heating it up, getting it red hot, and sledgehammering it like crazy. Diamonds are formed from millions of years of intense pressure, right. And then this beautiful diamond results from it. So this is the way nature works. Pressure and obstacles forge diamonds and mighty swords, right?
Yeah, but the human brain says, you know what? I would like the event without the process.
Yeah, well, we all want it to be easier. But believe me, this isn't hard to start. You don't have to like manifest these mystical powers overnight to be able to do this. I certainly didn't start out that way. I started out, weak and crying and suffering and wallowing and, all this kind of stuff. And I just took it a step at a time. I battled every little failure and, started accumulating this actual proof. And ultimately, it wasn't one of these believe and ye shall receive kind of things. The belief came from actual proof. Oh, and over time, and it doesn't take 50 years. I mean, I just happen to have been doing it that long. Over time, this rock solid foundation can be built. And it's not, if people look at this, here I am now with all these difficulties, how can I ever get there? And I can't even begin. Mm-hmm. This is like overwhelming. It's just not that complicated. It's very, very simple, We just start where we are right now and just find one little step we can take, one tiny little step that we can take I may not have, I'm at rock bottom. I maybe can't go, flying around the world creating all my images, but I can rent my house out. I mean, I found the one step, right?
Right.
And so we find there's always one little step in there. And every situation's got that one little step. And so somehow we have to train our brain or kind of get in. Now, I'm fortunate because when I forget that, I go to one of these Buddhist gatherings and hear all these people talking about something. I can probably do that. And then I go back home and I re-energize, right? So that process really, really, really helps. It's hard to do this in an isolated world. And you think about it, world peace is people interchanging and rubbing against each other, sometimes not comfortably, but the whole point is dialogue comes from people listening and talking and expanding and challenging themselves too, and we eventually can expand ourselves, right? So when I get in my own little isolated world, the first thing I do is if I'm traveling in India or wherever, I go on Google, I find the nearest Buddhist gathering I can get to because I know I need to make a cause to lift myself higher. But anyway, I don't have to have the power today to solve all these huge, tremendous problems that many people get buried with. We just need to start to
go gradually.
Yeah, do the things gradually, step in. What is the very, very next step that we can take? And that's why I wanted to kind of present these various avenues in the book to show everyone that through my own example, that it can be done when it seems impossible. And this is the process I went through, and these are the things I learned, and these are the lessons I learned from all these people like Tan and many others that I talk about in the book. And it reinforces this whole, none of these people ever heard about Buddhism or anything, but the concepts they're living are exactly Buddhism, right? And so I've learned, I'm getting this wisdom reinforced in the environment, and it's matching exactly what I've been studying all these years, and I can incorporate that, I think I've got a real job.
So you have to isolate your will and your thoughts and your mind from the surrounding reality sometimes, because sometimes the reality around you is very pessimistic or is getting you down, is depressing. So you have to be able to isolate your thoughts, or at least use what was the book, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, birds of a feather flock together mentality. You have to find your own in order to be able to sustain this line of thinking and acting, at least until it becomes more valid, more not valid, more strong. It gives you more independence in thinking and practicing.
Well, we have to be careful when we use the word isolate, because
not isolate.
We don't want to remove ourselves from reality. That's not the object.
What word would you use?
Well, I want to preface this by saying that there are a lot of philosophies, and older Buddhism was like this, that, I think from the beginning, Shakyamuni, the original Buddha, the historical one that we know about, he realized that people were suffering. And so what did they have to do? What could be done to eliminate this suffering? And that was kind of like the whole pursuit of the evolution of his thinking, is how can we elevate people so that they can not necessarily escape their suffering. So it's not a matter of isolating things out of your life. So these older forms of Buddhism started thinking that Well, you suffer because you have this earthly desire. You want a new car, you want this husband or wife, or you want you want something, and you can't have it because you don't have the facility to acquire it, and so you suffer. So early forms of Buddhism and a lot of other philosophies said, okay, get rid of the desire, and you get rid of the suffering.
Right.
But that's not real. When you're cold, you're cold. When you're hot, you're hot. When you're hungry, you're hungry. You can't get rid of earthly desire.
It goes against your nature.
It goes against the natural flow of the universe. It's all built on desire, right? So very quickly, well, over millennia, it took a while. The practice of how to actually begin to tap this inner power started being revealed and through experience. People realized that they went off to the mountaintop and gave up all their earthly desires, and they were still cold. They didn't have a blanket because they couldn't afford to buy one, right? So they realized through trial and error that giving up earthly desire wasn't the answer.
Common sense still has to be applied.
Well, it's not just common sense, but it's value creation. So like for example, money in and of itself isn't evil. There's the hellish side of greed for money. So you get all this money and you do negative things with it. You buy too many drugs and you drink too much alcohol or whatever you do with your money that doesn't create value.
Or acts of vanity.
Yeah, right. And then there's the enlightened aspect of greed. I just read that Bill Gates just gave away $51 billion, and he made a comment that they're going to say a lot of things about him when he dies, but one of them is not going to be he died a rich man, right? So the point is that
he's still rich.
If I had that much money, I'd give away $51 billion. I'd give it all to you and see what you do with it.
I would gladly accept that.
So, but the thing is, what I was saying is that money, the pursuit of money, isn't in itself evil, because we can do evil things with it, and yes, we can do great things with it. We can create irrigation systems and create libraries and teach people how to help themselves. We can do a lot of great things with it. So the pursuit of money is not an issue. It's the kind of value we want to create with it. So as we elevate our life condition out of this realm of relative, getting step by step, even though it takes a while to begin to get there, to get in the orbit is a better way of putting it. You're never fully enlightened, but you get in the orbit of moving in that direction.
Okay, towards.
Right. Moving forward toward that always. Then
you're tending.
Then our value creation capacity starts leaning toward, everything's cause and effect, starts leaning towards these loftier causes. And we awaken from the inner core, gradually the ability to start creating more value with our earthly desire. So ultimately, this highest forms of Buddhism don't propagate at all to get rid of earthly desire. Without earthly desire, there's no motivation. So we need earthly desire. The key thing is to start to orient, our lives through our daily causes and actions to create more value, to try to seek the value in whatever the obstacle is, whatever the desire is. How can I create more value with this? And even though it maybe starts intellectually, people are going to find all kinds of paths to help unfold this. In your case, you've read 1,300 books of how to do it, right? And a lot of people, maybe they just self-contemplate or join meditation groups or whatever. I mean, the point is every little step of beginning to open our mind toward trying to appeal to the greater self rather than the lesser self is going to help us activate power to create more value, and we don't have to give up the desire, I still haven't told you about the school bus, but I wanted to tell one little example. There was this lady that I knew 30 years ago or whatever. She had just started her Buddhist practice, and she worked as a bank teller. And she absolutely had, I remember the story, just this terrible boss. He was arrogant, and he had no compassion or empathy, and everybody hated him. His life condition was so bad that even the customers hated him, and then the customers were irritable. Everybody coming to the bank, they're already angry, give me some money. I mean, it's like, change this money for me. Give me it's just like the negativity of the leader
was spreading.
Just manifested everywhere, right? And so here's this lady she just heard about this mantra, heard all these great stories about the higher life. It all sounded so great to her. And so So, but she wanted to quit and she wanted to leave, right? Somehow she, through all this stuff that she was learning, she decided to, despite the obstacles, she was going to elevate herself rather than to let that stuff determine her destiny.
Elevate herself or influence the guy?
Well, she wasn't thinking too much about influencing him. She was wanting to elevate herself so that she wasn't suffering so much from it. She wanted a higher life condition.
Protect herself.
So that when he would throw all that bad stuff out, she wanted to try harder and to not be influenced and not be pulled down into that hole. So she basically self-reflected and started approaching developing her own life.
Was she Buddhist?
She had just been introduced to it, and so she had learned about this, and so she thought, okay, I can't do anything about him, because he's who he is and has got his own karma. I mean, she started thinking these kind of ways, but the only thing I'm in control of is me.
Right.
And I can, even though, he lays all this crap out and I'm feeling miserable, I mean, whether I run with that misery or battle it, it's up to me.
It's up to me.
So from that standpoint, that was all her Buddhist practice oriented towards trying to develop herself, right?
Personal responsibility at its best.
Ultimately, she became the bank manager, and the whole scene completely changed, and all the customers became happy, and people started coming in with smiles on their faces. It just revolutionized everything. So one person can change and influence everything.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Okay.
Now I got to tell you about the school bus. So earlier, I knew we'd get segued into stuff, but I love this little story.
That's all right.
So I was talking about this mystic law, and I defined the mystic law in the very, very last chapter. And please don't go to the last chapter and read it first, right? Work your way there. But I got to tell what this mystic law is, because people are going to be left hanging, right? So, but again, many people are not going to want this path, but they'd still.
Actually, the mystic law is something you already told me about the first day we met,
right,
which was the 2nd of August 1993 in Santorini.
Right.
Within the few first minutes or so. I mean, it was. I got to tell you, in the beginning, I thought, what's that? What's up with this guy? I mean, it was interesting, but it was very different from what I wanted to do and talk at the moment. All I wanted to do was talk photography. Right. But yeah.
Well, I probably didn't, we keep developing our wisdom, so I probably jumped right into it. I should have probably started talking about photography first, but I was talking about when I told you to remind me about how this universe has this universal rhythm just pulsing, that our bodies function in the same rhythm, just like the stars floating around the suns and stuff like that. And so after COVID, I'd been house sitting for a friend, another photographer friend, and we decided to use his RV and to go photograph cactus at the Stovepipe Cactus National Park in Arizona, which was many hours drive from California, and then we wanted to shoot star trails, around some stovepipe cactus. Well, this takes several hours to make all these exposures, and you have to do it after it's completely dark because it's a long time exposure. You can't have any ambient light. You can't be
pollution. Yeah.
You can't be light pollution. You can't be near cities. You got to wait a couple hours after sunset, so it's completely black. And then it takes 4 hours to make the exposure. So during this 4 hours, I had nothing to do, and we picked a totally clear night. And I'm telling you, I have never seen the billions and billions. I've never seen it like that. I mean, it was just unbelievable how many stars were up there. And I was just sitting there thinking, I'm part of this. I'm like one of these little stars out there, but there's billions and billions and billions of them out there. And so I, thought, I got to get my mantra going here, man, because this is the vibration that tunes into all of that. So I'm sitting there doing my mantra, just getting this resonant voice going, and I'm sending my voice, I visualized, to the edge of the universe, where there's no edge, of course, but just forever, to beyond infinity. I mean, this is I just felt unbelievable, the connection that I had with the universe. I mean, there was a tangible, real kind of feeling. It was alive and sounds kind of a little bit woo-woo and, metaphysical and stuff. But I mean, it was. I've been doing this for 50 years at the time, so it's it was very real to me.
Well, not really. I mean, Christians pray to their God all the time, even when walking or Or cursing their God, depending on the circumstances.
But the difference here is normally I'm in my room, doing my little chant, in a blank wall kind of thing, and I'm not actually seeing the stars to the edge of the universe, right? And so I'm sitting there for
completely
4 hours and just seeing into it. I mean, this was like mind-boggling. I'd never done my Buddhist mantra under these kind of conditions. And this is like, I'm going, wow, I got to come out here more often, man. Remind me, my role in all of this on a grand scale. So back to the school bus. So I was, needless to say, I was connected. I was totally fused in with the rhythm of after 4 hours of doing this, because I had to sit there anyway. So I'm going to create value. So, and it's too dark to read because I couldn't turn any lights on, but I could do my chant, right? So, I just, 4 hours, I was like, I was in some kind of like other world. I mean, I was really out there in the universe. I mean, it sounds kind of too crazy, but I mean, the point is I was really fused with the pulse of the way the universe worked. And so anyway, back to the school bus. So in the late 80s, just prior to my bankruptcy, when I had these 5 employees, one of the guys that worked for me, one of my photo assistants, was really amazing. And he really got, learned everything. And I could really see him as, that would take over my architectural photography business. So I could go I had a dream already to travel, but I was going to use the money from the architectural photography business, hand it over to him, let him keep making the money. I'd get the half the profits or whatever, and I could go traveling the world with it, right? And so that was kind of my plan. And then the bankruptcy happened, and I had to let him go and all that kind of stuff. So he went on his own way, became an architectural photographer in Seattle, and, did his whole life, got married, had kids, all this kind of stuff. And so then, decades later, Facebook came around, and somehow we reconnected. And so by then he'd gotten divorced and, all this stuff, had a new girlfriend. And so he wanted to rebirth himself. He wasn't a Buddhist. He wanted to rebirth himself and start all over. And so they dreamed up taking an old yellow school bus and making an amazing RV out of the thing. And this is like a big school bus, right? And you can't leave it painted yellow because in the States, when you see a yellow school bus stop, all the traffic has to stop and let the kids go out. Right. You can't look like a school bus. So they painted it blue, but with yellow sunflowers on it. So it's like, this is amazing. And they did all handcrafted, hand-built. 60s. Unbelievable. Yeah, kind of like that, And so, and he had become a fine art photographer, and he made his money by going to these art fairs, a different week in a different city, set up his little tent and sell, hang his artwork, his photographs and sell them. And that's the way they made their money. And so he was like traveling around the country constantly in this thing. And so,
sounds good to me.
Yeah, again, a dream life, right? I mean, this sounds fantastic to me. I mean, he only got 7 miles to the gallon, so it was costing a fortune. He had to, it's a big diesel-eating machine, It's just hard to move a big bus like that around. But so it had its challenges. He had to sell a lot of art. But I just, thought, it would really be great if I could meet this guy again and our paths would cross, But it's impossible. I'm never in the States. I'm always now mostly hanging out in India and stuff like that. And so it's like just something I thought about, but, never really thought I'd actively engage it, because he was never in L.A. He's just on the road all the time and never knew where he was going to park this thing. And so at any rate, the next morning after having this 4-hour engagement with the universe, totally fused, completely fused. And you went to sleep that night after we finished the shot. We got up the next morning. My friend doesn't do Buddhism. But so while he was eager to get back on the road, and so I said, I'm going to go out to the back and do my morning chant, And fine, no problem. So I'm back there just chanting away, doing my Buddhist engagement and totally coming from this perspective of fused with the universe, man. I mean, I feel like I could tackle anything and accomplish anything and everything was going to work, And so just feeling amazing. From 4 hours will get you there, And then all of a sudden my brain is like going 1,000,000 miles an hour with all the thoughts because it triggers wisdom and thoughts and energy and how to rebirth. I'm thinking of all these, I'm an old guy, but I'm thinking of all these amazing things I was going to go do. And I just was coming up as I was sitting there in the back of his RV chanting away, it's like all these ideas were coming. And so at a certain point I thought, okay, I had enough. I did 4 hours last night, 30 minutes is enough now. And so I had to tell him about all this stuff. And so I climbed back up and got in the front next to him, and I'm talking and I'm telling him about it. And I'm facing him, not looking out my side window. I'm looking at him talking about all this stuff. And for some reason, I kind of flicked my head over Lo and behold, I saw a blue school bus with yellow sunflowers painted all over it. And I'm going, that's my friend. I have connected with him. I'm so fused with the universe. I mean, I'm like in my own little world at that point, but completely convinced. And so I said, stop. My friend's going, what's going on, right? And I pulled up. My friend with the school bus and his girlfriend, they couldn't believe I just materialized out of nowhere. Now, what's the odds of this happening? Now, people say there's always coincidence and stuff. But
synchronicities.
From my standpoint, after all this time and after having experimented tens of thousands and thousands of times, I don't have any doubt at all that my connection with this vibration and energy is real and it manifests. And so this gives me incredible confidence. This is why I really kind of function from no fear and worry. Whatever the obstacle. I mean, 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with heart disease. And I needed 4 stents, or I was about to have a heart attack. I couldn't go up 2 steps without having severe angina, heart pains, and the blood test showed I had type 2 diabetes. I'm sitting there. I was in Bangkok, and I thought I better go do this before I die of a heart attack. I didn't know what was going on, and I was scheduled to fly to India 3 days later. And so they did all the tests and everything. The doctor says, you need stents immediately. You could have a heart attack any time. And my friend that I'd house set for with his cactus shooting thing, he's a clinical medical analyst, and he knows lots about heart disease and stuff like that. So he says, before you do all this invasive surgery, because I don't live in the States, I don't have Medicare insurance. So this was going to cost a lot of money and invasive. And I didn't like all that. And he said, why don't you get guidance from your doctor, your cardiologist, as if there's some things you could do metabolically to treat this, like become a vegan or, take medication or, exercise more, sleep better. I mean, all the kind of things that you can. So I liked this. He gave me a book, Dr. Dean Ornish, and how to change chronic diseases, by changing your lifestyle kind of thing.
Undo it.
Yeah. What?
What's the name
Undo
of
it. Undo it. How most chronic diseases can be altered or something like that by Dr. Dean Ornish. It was great. So my friend recommended, I read it, and half the book was about establishing, your daily life rhythms of eating differently and exercising more and sleeping better and stuff. The other, maybe 2/3 of the book actually, was about trying to develop a stress-free life and no worry and meaningful relationships and all that. Well, that stuff was easy. I've been doing that for 50 years, so I didn't have to work on that part. I just switched over and stopped eating meat and dairy and all this kind of stuff. Right. Bottom line, the most important thing is I realized that I could die. My life could be over tomorrow or today, and my mission's not complete, and I can't let this stop me. So at that point, because of my wealth of experience with this, I thought, I've got to strengthen my vow. I've got to begin new. I got to rebirth myself from now and really go out and do this. I thought I started this 30 years ago from after pizzas. No, it's all fresh, new obstacles, new challenges. And that from that life condition, so powerful with such a grand dream, inspiring and living, trying to bring out this higher self, this, more value creative self, that I was going to use that life force to help me overcome these issues. Because, clearly if my life force is strong, it's certainly not going to hurt. And I know how to activate it. So that's the first thing I did. So, I went to the doctor and said, I'm not going to have these stents right now. And I'm getting on the plane and I'm going to India. Can I fly? She said, well, be careful, So I went. Well, a year later, it was all gone. I just, now it's 2 years later, last week when I left Bangkok to come here, I went to see this cardiologist. And by then I've had I had a rheumatologist because issues came up, and I had an ophthalmologist because of my macular degeneration. Lots of other crap started happening in my life. But I had blood tests with all 3 doctors and all the checkups and everything. I'm completely back to normal. All my blood counts are normal. It's gone. My arteries are now. I joined a gym because I was doing a bunch of stuff in Bangkok for a few months. I was running 2 hours a day on the elliptical machines. I take steps 2 at a time. It's like no heart pain, nothing whatsoever. It's gone. So yes, I became the vegan, and I still eat fish. But I got rid of the dairy and all the yogurt and all this stuff that was building that cholesterol buildup. And so I did what the doctor said. I took the blood thinner. I, took the cholesterol reducing thing. I took the lowering the blood sugar medication. I did all that stuff. But the most important thing is I strengthened my life condition, and I strengthened my vow that I got to live. And this is why I'm making this 20-year trip plan that starts, I figure 80 is a nice round figure. This all started 2 years ago, but now like 80 is a nice round number. I'm starting a 20-year trip. That'll get me to 100, right?
When's your birthday again?
August 21st.
August 21st.
So the point is this life force and this motivation all comes from my determination that I got to live, I got to create value with my life. Even though I got a long ways to go and more development, I'm still grappling with ego. And, these things are like, they'll come back if you stop going to the gym. All those lack of strength it'll dissipate, right? So at any rate, what gives me this vitality, and I could say, my Buddhist practice gives it to me or whatever, but fundamentally,
it's more than that.
It's, somehow I've used all of those tools that I've encountered, and I've strengthened a vow that focuses it to loftier goals. And I got to live. I got to overcome this stuff. I got to have actual proof. And I have the actual proof, health-wise. I never had health issues in my whole life. I get a cold once every 20 years. So this is all brand new territory for me.
So you enhance your whys?
Enhance?
Your whys. Why am I doing that? Why am I living? What's my purpose? What's everything?
Right. So I think even if people, might not want to use all the tools I mentioned in the book and stuff, but, we can kind of all start asking ourselves, why are we here? Why are we doing this? And once we start even a little bit, taking a little step of, what kind of meaning can we, what can I, how can I make my marriage better? All these, whatever it is our life is about. Lifting to that out of ourself kind of thing. That's a first step,
Well, I think that many people confuse in their minds and consequently in their lives the acceptance of reality with being passive about their lives, like as if things are determined and cannot be changed, and what's the point? Why should I be struggling and everything? And if this mentality supersedes any creative efforts and any sense of development, then you're just have an excuse, not you, in general, to stay in the same lane, in the same level of life forever, perhaps. Maybe even wishing that things that don't change, not because they're good, but because you have been used to the misery or relative misery of your circumstances. That takes quite some courage to be able to say, you know what, I'm not satisfied with what I'm experiencing, so I'm going to gather my strengths and move on. Not just incremental progress, but I really want to change stuff. Mm-hmm. I know that I will have to take one step at a time, but I'm prepared to go the distance. So most people, maybe they do not think that way, and they are not willing to act that way because it takes some sacrifice.
Probably primarily because they haven't seen ways to rise above that way of thinking, right? And actually, anybody listening to this podcast, you know me, a cause must have been made. You didn't just show up here, but randomly, right? So what I'm getting at is, if you showed up here and you're listening to this conversation, that shows a seeking mind. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's the very first step, is to say, okay,
to say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. Yeah, it's I keep saying this is the first step, but that's a really important one as well, right? The seeking mind. So if you don't have a seeking mind, but you're not happy, or your life could be richer, or your life could be happier. Maybe you're not miserable. Everybody's at some point in that spectrum. Some people are really, really, really happy, but can you say that there's no better way no more things you can do to enrich your life more? There's always some growth and development. Otherwise, we stagnate and we get old.
Or maybe you don't believe that this is possible for you. Maybe you think that everything might be possible for other guys, which are more, I don't know, advanced, lucky, whatever, than you, but...
Even if somebody's feeling like that, you're here listening to this, that's showing a seeking mind. So, then battle that. Don't let your seeking mind go back to sleep. Say, okay, well, I'm going to check it out. I'm going to start to try to incorporate this, or, some kind of what is the first step you can move forward with this, And your story is going to be completely different from mine. You got a totally different set of circumstances.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that this famous, sentence quote that says you gotta face your deepest fears may scare people. They're not ready to go to the deepest fear. They need to face their lightest fears first and then go progressively. Going against my deepest fear might be one of the most uncomfortable sensations that I will ever be able to experience.
Okay, so
too deep.
Very interestingly, if we tune into this universal rhythm, what I've experienced is that no obstacle, since I started trying to tune into it, no obstacle has ever hit me that I couldn't overcome. So the really, really bad ones, over the course of 52 years, there have been obstacles that have been far, far worse than the ones I was encountering 50 years ago. But, through the steady seeking mind, trying to expand that seeking mind, my life condition also magnified. So I gained strength along the way. I built this fortitude. There's no end to this, so it's like I can't say all the fortitude I need, but
ongoing.
Whatever I've got, I've built it through battling the little things, right? Because this mantra puts you in this universal rhythm to find school buses or whatever it is, it also puts you in a rhythm that the really bad stuff, if any's coming your way, won't hit until you're ready to handle it. So my big stuff didn't hit in the beginning because I would have just died. I would have just probably jumped off a cliff or really let myself die in one of those accidents, right? So I just took it a step at a time. I built up the strength and the fortitude. I had karma. It was on its way, but it didn't come until I was strong enough to battle it. And at that point, when really heavy stuff would hit, I had this foundation, and I actually used that to even strengthen.
So is the universe watching over you somehow?
Well, don't think of it as this omnipotent being that's kind of orchestrating everything, right? Yeah. If you want to think it that way, that's fine. I don't want to challenge anybody's.
It's too anthropomorphic, but yeah, I'm just saying.
Religion in any kind of way. But there, if anybody's wondering, if you now, I'm talking about the loftier forms of Buddhism that elevated over centuries, millennia, not the earlier ones where they're, actually thinking the powers outside of themselves. But as we start to elevate this kind of like perspective in our life, then there's kind of an aspect that develops that activates kind of security in our life. And this is why things like fear and worry about the future, like I'm not really, because of my crash in Bali and because I was already almost 70, it's like, I'm not particularly wanting to go start like a 20-year-old and start up a new career or whatever. I want to go pursue my art. Well, we all know it's hard to sell art. It's hard to sell books. It's just hard to get results from social media promotion and all this kind of stuff.
But it's very fulfilling.
Yeah. But the thing is, I don't have any worry. I just don't have any worry. It's just not there. Stuff's going to happen, and I'm going to grow from it. I've already know. I've seen so much proof from it. And whatever I've got to go through because I made the causes to experience it, well, I'll just deal with it because I already know it's not going to come because I'm in this, I'm tuning into this rhythm. It's not going to come at a point where I can't handle it, It's just, I may indeed have to handle heavier stuff than I've handled so far, but I'm getting stronger month by month and year by year. And so, I made the causes for whatever's on its way. It's just an effect. And it's there for me to manifest my ultimate enlightenment, and more importantly, to try to inspire other people to do the same thing, whatever their circumstances are, So, as I've forged this new perspective about why I'm really on this earth, and I'm not going to go out and proselytize and save the world. It's just one person at a time. Whoever I meet, I can somehow leave them feeling better than when I met them, And it's just one person at a time, So it's not like this grand task that we got to go assume or anything. It's just, you're out there meeting people anyway, right? So just, we can either be nasty to them or we can, somehow lift them up, And we go to this supermarket checkout thing and the clerk is being hassled and had 1 million people being nasty to her and everything. You can just, it's your choice whether you say one little thing that kind of empathizes,
So you need to be conscious in every second of your life, pretty much.
Well, I don't think anybody can really be conscious every second of their life.
But the closest approximation.
Well, we need to get in the orbit. So some days we're not going to do it. We're going to fail at it, and we're not very good at it. We're going to learn some harsh lessons, because we failed at it. But we're in the orbit of trying to improve. And that being in that orbit is how enlightenment, or this full manifestation of absolute happiness, can ultimately unfold. Not that you're got to be capable of doing it from day one, because none of us are.
No, not day one. It's an evolution. It's an evolving process, I'm sure. But I'm just saying that it starts with a decision, and then you take it from there, and you're building it one step at a time, I'm guessing. As in with everything. I remember my first photographs were not good. My first writings were not good. Even when I started using a bicycle when I was a kid, I fell and skinned my knees. I mean, it's an evolution in just about everything. Your empathy evolves. Your understanding of other people's issues evolves. Everything evolves. Otherwise, we would have been born like as final products, quote unquote, instead of evolving pieces of mindset and thinking. This book has so many personal stories in them. Are there any ones that are in your favorite or your... I'm sure you had hundreds of encounters all over the years, all over the place, all over the world. Are there any ones that you would like to mention, like an honorable mention?
Well, there's a short one, kind of short. So if I think about, of course I've had, because I'm traveling so much, I meet lots of people, and not every encounter is like full of wisdom and great lessons to learn and everything, but there have been many, and a few of them I talk about in the book. But if I think of like what was a pivotal encounter that literally shifted everything, that would start to point me toward this orbit of, living a richer life and a more full life, one that's not determined by my external circumstances, where my happiness wasn't determined by however bad things might get, and to start to shift towards forging a stronger life condition that would ultimately, over time, give me the power to grapple with whatever might be coming my way. And so I must say, going back to the falling asleep at the wheel kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So when I was 27, my first falling asleep was at 18, so it was about a decade later. And in that decade, I probably fell asleep 15 or 20 times, drove off the road into the gravel, but somehow woke up before.
15 times?
Yeah, at least. Whoa. But somehow, and I give 2 or 3 of those examples in the book that lead up to the big crashes. But somehow, as I look back now, I think that I must have made causes long before this existence, because now I kind of accept that, I must have made causes long before this existence to go through this stuff. So I couldn't, even though I didn't know it, I'd made causes that I already knew I couldn't die. I had to live. I had to somehow overcome these negative propensities because I had a mission. But I'm convinced all that was decided in some previous existence before I showed up here. And that's why I didn't die quicker. That's why I didn't die from some of those earlier traumatic things. Okay. But at any rate, I tried to become this architectural photographer back then, and I just had no training as a photographer, and my luck was really bad. And because my life condition was so low, I had like a very negative aura because I didn't have a decent portfolio. When I would line up an interview, people just didn't trust me. I can't give this guy a job. He'd be a disaster. Everything will go wrong. I'm sure they they might not have had those exact words, but my negativity just wasn't moving my life forward. And I didn't know how to change this. My upbringing, religion wasn't helping me, and being an atheist hadn't helped me. It just I didn't have any way to go. I didn't know how to start to grapple with this. But I was trying hard. And so finally I landed a $1,000 gig, which was a lot of money in the mid-'70s, and to photograph bank interiors all night long for an awards competition. So it was a tight deadline. And I did the job, and I was young then, so I could work all night, and dropped the film off at the lab the next day, and later, tried to grab a couple hours sleep. I was living in my van again. And, later I checked with the lab and discovered the worst news I could ever discover, and that is that one of the staff had gone into the dark room and turned the lights on and destroyed all my film. And this was like, oh man, you could just imagine how that just sent me off the deep end. Here I finally had this opportunity, and it was taken away from me. I'm going, it's just not worth living if even I try and it won't work. Right. So I was really in the pits of misery. And, back then, I had a lot of pride. I really felt bad about doing some of the things I did to live. Like, for example, to eat, I would go to a shopping market and push the cart around and fill it up with stuff like I was going to buy it. And a lot of times, at least in the States, people open a box of crackers and eat a few, because they're hungry, and they'll pay for them when they check out. And so I was doing that, and grapes and stuff. I could munch a few grapes. It's hard to eat an apple, but you could munch a few grapes on the sly, right? And so that's the way I would eat. And then I'd park the cart, somewhere like I'm going to go off looking for a loaf of bread or something, and I'd sneak out. This is before they had CCTV cameras to spot me, right? Sure. So I really felt miserable. I just oh man, my pride, my dignity, everything had been taken away, and I really I was at wit's end. I just had no idea how I was going to change all this stuff. So, I'm getting emotional about this, so I was sitting in my van. It was cold. I had no place to go to the toilet safely, and, just stolen my dinner again. And I must have looked like totally miserable. And so about that time, this girl came out with her shopping cart full of groceries, and she got in her car and she looked over at me and she said, you look really miserable. And I'm kind of like, what is it? Screw you. It's to hell with you. But I didn't. And because it was like compassion, I felt that,
right.
And so, she was just right there putting the groceries in. And so she started talking to me. And at any rate, after 10 or 15 minutes, she actually was a Buddhist practitioner. And she started telling me about this mystic law, and that if I tapped into this innate wisdom, these hidden powers that I write about, that I could change whatever it was that had me so distraught. And I don't know, it's like I'm the country bumpkin. I don't do this kind of stuff. I don't do New Age stuff. I just wasn't open to that. I wasn't brought up like that. I just couldn't do this kind of stuff. But, at that point, I was really at the rockiest of bottoms, right? And she was so kind and so, reaching out her life, and connecting with mine. And there was a response to that, So she taught me how to do it, taught me how to recite this mantra. And just one time, and I don't know, I couldn't define it, but something felt different, right? And so anyway, I started doing it. Boy, I'm telling you, the next year was really hard. I was still living in my van, but I was getting encouraged. I'd come to the gatherings and so miserable and everything. Before I'd left, I felt great. And the next morning, I'd feel miserable again, right? So it was really hard to battle and grapple with this. But over time, I was little by little starting to get into this orbit of, starting some kind of way of viewing obstacles as opportunities, things that just didn't make sense to me. But I started trying to do it. And if I couldn't do it, I'd do more of my mantra to kind of build up the life condition to do it and everything. So at any rate, about a year into the practice, this Buddhist practice, I had my first really severe car accident. And I fell asleep on the Santa Monica Freeway in Los Angeles, and I was going at least the speed limit, 70 miles an hour. And back then they didn't have concrete dividers; they just had a chain link fence with posts every 10 feet or something. When I woke up, I had plowed down 17 of these fence posts. That's like 170 feet. I don't know how many meters that is. But and my car, there was a cable running down the middle. My van was straddling that cable. It almost jumped it into oncoming traffic. And I realized that, and this was I'd never crashed a car, and this was like really bad. But I'd been doing the Buddhist practice, and this respect for the sanctity of life, this was kind of starting to sink in. And I was saying, man, I got to live. I can't die. It's just that something was starting to get stimulated there.
It's getting too much.
Yeah. So, but I still wasn't strong enough to kind of really grapple with it. It still was kind of vague. I wasn't cognizant that I ought to go to psychotherapist or anything,
How old were you?
Around 28 at that point,
Right.
So, so at any rate, I kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And then about a year later, I had a brand new car, and I was, starting to get more progress. My life condition was getting stronger, and people were giving me jobs because they trusted me, and my portfolio was getting, the whole thing was building, Still had lots of obstacles, but I could really feel that I was stronger, And so I'd always wanted to photograph the Hot Air Balloon Festival fiesta in Albuquerque, where 500 balloons go up. It's a glorious thing to photograph. I've been trying to do it for years. And so I thought, I got to go do this because I had a brand new car and everything. And so I took off, and I didn't count, we didn't have Google Maps and stuff. I didn't calculate the time. And I was way under. The balloons were going to rise on a particular morning at 7 a.m. So I left the evening before thinking it was an 8 or 10 hour trip. It was a 16-hour trip, right? And so I'm like, as the night's progressing, and of course I'm getting sleepy. And by then, I knew I couldn't die. I had a mission. I had to live. I had to battle whatever that demon was. It was getting close where I could battle it, and I was feeling confident more and more, even though I still had fear and stuff like that. And so, I was driving along. I realized if I didn't drive 100 miles an hour, that I wasn't going to make it by 7 a.m., and the whole thing was going to just be for naught. So, I was in a crazed kind of mentality, and I didn't have the wisdom I have now. So I was driving 100 miles an hour just foolishly, and trying to stay awake. And I'm like slapping myself so hard, I'm sure I was bruising myself. And I had an ice cooler next, between the seats, and I'm putting ice, and I'm hanging my head out there, and I'm chanting my mantra, screaming it out to the universe. I got to live. I don't want to die. I'm screaming all this kind of stuff. It was really, talk about cinematic. And, at some point, I fell asleep. And when I woke up, I had hit the end of a concrete guardrail. And when I woke up, the passenger tire was in the seat next to me. And the car was completely crumpled. Every window was broken. I couldn't open any doors to get out or anything. And I didn't have a scratch. Nor did my camera bag sitting in the back seat. Didn't spill out. Nothing happened to it. And I'm sitting there, and an amazing revelation, an epiphany, just from having done this less than a couple of years, I realized this was the last chance. It happens again, I'm dead.
Yeah, the cat has exceeded lifespan.
This was the 9th one. There's no more. I realized that's so real, and I realized there would not be another chance. And at that moment, based on whatever meager Buddha powers I'd started to tap, I made such a powerful determination that I was going to purge this from my life. And it was not going to consume me, and I was going to go live a glorious life. I was just a kid, almost. So in the past 52 years, I've had to drive all night countless times due to circumstances. This has never come back again. It's completely gone. So I purged something that clearly I needed psychological help. I needed deep psychological help. I did it without even getting psychological help. So that just showed me that I have hidden powers. I didn't really understand it all then, but that I could tap them, and I could unleash them, and I could transcend these kinds of deep things I couldn't even understand, and set my life on a new orbit to this glorious path. And based on that, I've just built on that. So I, didn't have these capacities, whatever I got today to whatever extent. I didn't have that from day one. I didn't have it at all. I just was weak and just succumbing to everything and that sort of thing. But I just took it, and no obstacle has ever hit me that I can't overcome. And there's been worse ones from the beginning, But each one I just keep manifesting more power. So I'm rebirthing myself. I'm just getting younger and younger. My brain is getting younger and younger and younger. I keep coming up with new dreams and all kinds of stuff.
Actually, this is great news for our viewers because some people may feel overwhelmed by all this, and maybe they cannot associate because they have not seen the progression, have not felt the progression of all this. They might think that you were born that way. They were, number one from scratch, and they don't see. It's. I think it's part of the time. Sometimes people want the event, but they cannot understand that in order to get to the event, you have to go through the process. And the process can be painful in the beginning. It can be linear and very slow growth, and then it kind of takes off, and it can become exponential in the end, because everything accumulates. The experience you got accumulated with everything you've already learned, and the way you become more mature, and the way you face new realities or realities that repeat themselves is now more enforced by whatever you've learned all along the way. And I mean, when you're facing Mount Everest from the bottom of the mountain, and it's almost unfathomable that you will be able to climb 8 kilometers upwards and reach the top. And maybe this is stopping lots of people from not fulfilling their dreams, but even starting the procedure, even starting getting on the course.
Well, there may be lots of people who are kind of already halfway up Mount Everest, right? When they listen to this podcast or whatever. And there may be people already climbed Everest a few times. And lots of people sitting at the bottom thinking this is impossible, right?
Contemplating.
So there's the whole spectrum of kinds of people who might be listening to what we're talking about. But the bottom line is, I am convinced wherever we are, flaws and all, is the perfect place for us. So if you feel like you're at the bottom, that's the perfect place, because that's where you are, and you can only grow from there.
But so it's a long way up, though.
Yeah, but we're only going to do this a step at a time. Mm-hmm. And you can realize that as we start to tune into the natural balance of the way the universe works, then we're going to get stronger and stronger to tackle. We might get a mile into the thing and discover we got a cliff that we got to descend and come back. I mean, all kinds of obstacles are going to arise. An avalanche happens or something in front of us. So life's going to keep throwing us stuff, but we don't have to worry too much about getting to the top right now. I mean, we just got to worry about what's the next step. What's the next step?
Is it easier to do this when you're young, when you're middle-aged, or when you're older? Because the issue of mortality comes to mind when you're older. Time is kind of shrinking, in generally speaking, and you realize that, I've wasted a little bit of time till now due to whatever proclivities I had. So now maybe I get to get my S together.
Well, probably it's easier for older people because they've already seen the gain and loss and the struggle, and the mortality issue starts. I mean, clearly with all these health issues, I'm thinking about mortality. I mean, your mother just died. What was she, 87?
89.
89.
Almost,
right.
Yeah.
And the lay leader of my Buddhist organization, Daisaku Ikeda, he died last year. He was 95. So I mean, people die, right? Okay. So mortality does become, and as you get older,
an issue,
your body start, the heart happens, and the, macular degeneration or whatever issues we got. This stuff just happens, right? So of course we're thinking more about mortality, and from that perspective, if I was looking at my own life, I probably would be more receptive to try to get onto this path and into this orbit as an older person than I might have been when I was younger. Because, when I was younger, it's like you don't think about this stuff, and you just want to, have fun and thrills, and maybe you're, have some goals for a career and stuff like that, but you're not thinking about mortality in general, But young people have enthusiasm, and they don't, look at young Tan, being so young, but he didn't have bitterness, and he was open-minded, and he could try things and meet people, and all this kind of stuff. So when we're a youth, we have capacities and things that we don't have. Imagine you're young, 18 or 20, and you start getting on this path at that age, imagine the stuff that you can accomplish. I mean, the reality is I got these great dreams, but in 10 years from now, when I'm 90, I'm probably not going to have as much energy as I have today. But when you're young, imagine all your whole life's in front of you, all the great things you can accomplish. It's amazing, right? So, boy, I wish I had encountered this when I was 18, when I first, or even younger.
Yeah, well, that's why there's a quote that says that youth is wasted on the young. So, yeah, you realize a few things as you grow older.
Bottom line, there's no perfect age.
Yeah.
You know, the only parameter is that you just start from where you are. You know, and you're going to be maybe full of anxiety and fear and doubt and question, you know, if it's possible to change and rise above where you are. Maybe your life is already pretty together and you're not worrying about certain kinds of things. But I guarantee you some kind of health issue is going to come, or, you know, when the loved ones are going to grow old and die, we're all going to have to encounter stuff, right? And so the important thing is that we're all on a path to develop these hidden powers, which are not mystical. They're just part of natural life. But because we're, well, let's say the highest life form, many people might question that.
Yeah,
but we can choose.
It is questionable.
Yeah. We can choose whether we want to be nice to people or nasty, or whether we exercise or not, or eat the wrong things or drink the wrong thing. We can choose. We can actually overpower the natural rhythm in our life. We can induce cancer. We can induce lack of friends because we've engaged in being bitter and whatever. I mean, because we ostensibly the highest life form, we can actually choose and overpower whereas dogs, they're kind of just like flow with the natural rhythm of things, right? Ants and people, and snakes, they just kind of do what they do, right? Birds, but we can choose to go against that if we want to. And so we can choose to create a real imbalance, that causes stuff. I mean, I had an imbalance in my life with this suicidal death wish kind of thing. And I'm sure I began making that. Now I'm convinced I started this long, long before I ever popped into this existence, But whether I did or not, let's don't dwell on those aspects too much. We got to concentrate on what we're doing right now. So that's why I say where we are right now is exactly the spot we need to be, because this is where we can begin from.
Yeah, plus we have the memories of the past, and we can be we're conscious in the present, so we can benefit from them, learn the lesson, and create something better for tomorrow, which is something that needs a little bit of mental energy, but it's doable easily. So if you were to, if I open that door right now and your 25-year-old self came in and you had the chance to talk with yourself, the former self, half a century ago, your younger self, what would you advise the guy before Buddhism, before he met Buddhism in that parking lot?
Right. So if my younger self came in,
knowing
what I know now,
what you know now,
what would I tell that kid?
What would you tell him? It's going to be all right, kid.
Yeah, well, that maybe he's encouraging or whatever, but I think that my biggest limit when I was young is I didn't see any opportunity in obstacles. I just didn't see it. I didn't want the obstacles. I didn't want the difficulties. I didn't see any opportunities.
In obstacles.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't see any way to grow from difficulty.
Oh, okay.
Whereas now I'm looking at, because of the difficulty, I could grow. Right. I mean, if I hadn't had my face flat on the ground couldn't have taught me anything. I roughed up my face, but that taught me some lessons. I couldn't have read about them in a book. I couldn't have learned about him if I kept my $1 million and made $10 million. I just couldn't have learned those lessons. I wouldn't have changed my mission. Self-volition. I changed it on my own. I would never have done any of that if I didn't have the obstacle. So it seems impossible to appreciate the obstacles, but somehow I would talk to that young person and give them that perspective, at least plant the seed, so that they in a way that I might be so determined that I was going to plant it deep within their life. I'm going to be so determined that I'm not going to be over overbearing. I'm not going to get over exuberant. It's going to be subtle. It's like a swan. They're gliding like it's like no problem, but their little feet underneath are paddling like crazy. So when I meet this young guy, I'm going to be a swan coming along, but my little feet are paddling like crazy, that I'm determined that whatever I say, whatever, thing I could leave them with is that there is real opportunity in difficulty. I know now, without the difficulty, which is going to come anyway, there couldn't be growth. And that is a great way to live life, because if difficulty is opportunity, then there's nothing to complain about. It's just, let's get to work. I mean, kind of, that starts...
Yeah, I get the idea, of
right.
course. So if the message was to be addressed not to your former self, your younger self, but to the world, what would you say? Like the expanse, everybody who is willing to listen and will give you the time of day to listen to the podcast or your personal device, what would you say to them?
All we have to do is to look at the misery in the world right now, in Sudan, Gaza, Ukraine, just as 3 examples.
Yeah, you name
it. We got to create a better life. We just got to. The whole world is really out of balance with the universe. This is crazy. I mean, we're destroying the planet. I mean, the droughts and the tsunamis and the earthquakes and just it's just getting it's crazy out there. And, the last thing we ought to be doing is killing people and not having any respect for different cultures and the respect for the sanctity of life. Ideally, we should be celebrating all these differences, not trying to get, these people to become this religion or whatever and change everybody. But boy, just celebrating all the foods they like to eat and all the ways they think and all the ways the dances and the cultural things and the art and just whatever. It's totally different than what we do. But boy, it's just so rich. So diversification is so great, right? So it all begins by us saying that I'm going to somehow, I don't know how, maybe we're saying that, but I got to expand myself. I got to expand my way of thinking. I got to start embracing humanity. It feels better to... the Dalai Lama once said that, he was talking about complaint. It's like, basically he was saying, don't complain. It just feels better not to, right? Yeah. So it's like, it feels better to be more compassionate. It feels better to be more magnanimous. It just feels better. Your whole life is richer and you enrich every single one around you. Now, now we can only do this one person at a time because I can't go out and meet. I mean, maybe 10 million. Maybe 10 million people read my book, but the point is I can't go out and meet. Well, I got
not
hurt.
Personally.
So I only got 20, 25 years to go meet this 10 or 100 million or however many it is. Right? But the point is that I can meet one person. And I'm going to go, when I show up in Nepal, I'll meet one person that day and I'll just may not say a word about Buddhism, but I'll connect with their life and just make a rich kind of experience. On my flight here from Bangkok to Doha, there was a guy sitting next to me from Uganda. He was a chemistry professor in Bangkok. He was going back home to Uganda. I had this most incredible discussion with him. It was a 6-hour flight, so for about 4 hours we slept. But the last couple of hours, it was just, it was so rich, and he's telling me about his life and his dreams. And I didn't go too much into my own thing. I did give him, a card for my book, so maybe he'll read it. He'll learn about all these things later. But I didn't even mention it to him. But, just the rich connection was so beautiful. His name was Dennis. That's probably not his African name, but, we left feeling amazing, both of us. We felt like, I don't know, but we kind of felt like we made a lifelong friend, and we exchanged Facebook, addresses and stuff like that. And I noticed later he bought my book, so it's like there's some kind of influence there. But the thing is, it was such a rich experience. I didn't, talk to him, trying to promote my book or anything, but I just, was determined I was going to connect with his life. Just really pure and beautiful, and just listen. And there were a few avenues there where his life was pretty together. His professor, can travel the world, very educated kind of thing. He didn't mention any problems or issues, and he's single, so he doesn't have wife problems or anything. He didn't mention anything, right? But still, the most important thing is that I have made one person at a time. I've made a life-to-life bond, and I'm treasuring his life, and I think he's treasuring my life. So he and I are not going to go kill each other. So there's my first step with doing world peace right there, is with my connection with somebody I didn't even know, to create a kind of a deep, deep life bond, even though maybe we never meet again or whatever. I thought, who knows, who would know that you would become my best friend and we'd be doing this podcast 32 years later, right? But so you never know. But
almost to the day. Almost
to the day. Yeah, 2 more days. I'm glad we've never celebrated on the exact day, right? So, but this time we're going to get to, and we've made a plan. We're going to do this in 20 years. When I'm 100, you'll be 80. You'll be my age now, and we're going to meet October 2nd, 2045 in Santorini, where we first met. So this is going to be great. Right? But the key thing here is that my path now is just to see how many people's lives I can come in contact with, how deep I can connect with them, how good I can make us both feel together as human beings. And in that sense, without saying it, kind of magnify the dignity of life and the beauty of life. And, and then if we each kind of walk away from that, and then the next person we meet, we try to do that step by step. It's only one person at a time, right? Whoever's sitting next to me on the plate or whatever, right? They don't know what they're in for. But, the thing is, it's not complicated. It's not too grand for us to begin. Where we are is perfect. All the problems or obstacles or lack thereof, there's always a place to grow and expand. And if we start that process ourselves, and then just, somehow along the way, if we realize that helping another person do that, that's pretty great cause, right?
Amazing, yeah.
And so pretty soon, it seems like impossible. How do you stop a war with one person at a time, right? Well, it's never going to happen if we don't start with one person at a time. And that's all I can do.
That's so true.
I can write a book, maybe 10 million people read it. But, the point is I really can only meet one person at a time. And that's, so it's, maybe I've been a little over exuberant, and it seems like, wow, what's all that about, right? But bottom line, where we are right now is the perfect place. All these problems are, you can believe or not, whether you chose them or whatever, but the point is you got them. The most important thing is we rise from them, and that spirit that we get from winning and the fortitude we build from that to somehow inspire somebody else to do that same path. And little by little, we can influence the world so that, we're not criticizing people for their differences and maybe killing them, as wars do.
But embracing them.
Embracing them and embracing all these differences. And, that's the way I'm going to do my part to try to create this world. And I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life trying to do that.
Well, you've already been doing that. So, yeah. So tell us, where can people find the book?
Well, it's on Amazon.com, and you can also get it Amazon.it for Italy, and .de for Deutschland for Germany, and .uk in the
UK.
Yeah, and there's many Amazon locations, which means you get cheaper shipping if you order from those websites rather than just Amazon.com, and you probably not going to have to pay all the tariffs that are floating around right now.
There's also a Kindle edition.
It's in hardback and paperback and Kindle. Yes.
Right. So you can read it on your phone, tablet, and everything.
Yeah. If you've got the eyesight to see it on your phone, I can't read it on my phone.
That's great. Glen, this has been amazing, and our friendship extends 32 years in the past, minus 2 days. So we're going to celebrate on the 2nd of August. Today is the 31st of July, 2025, and we met on the 2nd of August, 1993, which seems like 8 million years ago, like a million years ago. But it's been an amazing journey so far, and little did I know then that today we would be sitting across the table in a podcast in Thessaloniki, it's been an honor to be your friend and having you here today with me.
I just want to say, I mentioned this to you the other night, is because I was kind of already on this dream kind of life of traveling the world, and you so wanted to be able to do that sort of thing in your own life. In a way, as I mentioned the other night, I was kind of like in a mentoring kind of position. I'd already determined that I was going to try to encourage people and help them in any kind of way like that to get inspired. And over this 32 years, now you've read this 1,300 books. You're so full of wisdom and knowledge and stuff like that. But actually, there's been a transition in the role, you're actually my mentor now. I've learned so much. I mean, without your help and the focus on, how to approach this book, I mean, it wouldn't have evolved so, which I think beautifully, thanks to you, but because that, your life has enriched mine so much. So it's not just you feeling enriched. I feel like overwhelmingly enriched, And, I mean, there may be people out there who don't drink or don't believe in drinking, but Giannis and I are not two of those. So we're going to drink lots of Retsina and lots of Ouzo on August 2nd, right? We couldn't do the podcast that day for sure.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Thank you very much, Glenn.
Okay, my pleasure.
Okay,
see you.
Hey. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, leave your comments below, share the link of this video, and please remember to click the subscribe button so you will be the first to know when we create and upload new videos like this one.